The following may contain offensive language, adult humor, and or content that some viewers may find offensive. The views and opinions expressed by any one speaker does not explicitly or necessarily reflect or represent those of Mark Radulich or W2M Network. Please listen with caution, or don't listen at all.
There'll be spectacle, there'll be fantasy, there'll be daring do and stuff like you would never see.
Be a movie. Yeah, we're gonna be a movie.
Starring everybody
And me. There'll be heroes bold, there'll be comedy, and a lot of fuss that ends for us real happily. Be a movie. We can watch it all develop. Starring everybody.
And me. We'll take the world and set it on its ear.
Come on, join in. We're gonna start right here.
And we are going to start right here. Hello, you are listening to a Radulich Broadcasting premiere podcast triple feature. I am your host, the mandated reporter, and frankly unmodified Mr. Mark Radulich. And tonight we are focusing on the late, great Stanley Kubrick. Yes, it's another director focus. We are looking at three of his films, one being A Clockwork Orange, starring Malcolm McDowell, the next starring Lolita, starring Dorian Price. No, starring James Mason.
You're going to regret that later.
And finally, Eyes Wide Shut, starring the vivacious Nicole Kidman and the flying in an airplane Tom Cruise. I am joined by not flying in an airplane, my brother from another mother, longtime contributor to the Radulich Broadcasting Network, and a pretty cool fruit who really knows where his towel's at. Ladies and gentlemen, unmute your mic. It's Sean Comer, you're not. How do you do, sir?
Yes, Blighty Uncle Sean, back again.
Outstanding.
Just looking out for them drunk yoga moms.
Okie dokie. And of course, joining us again, because he can't get enough of that those sugar crisps. Good God. God, once you get sucked into the Radulich Broadcasting cult vortex, you never quite get free again. But he's here.
Never forget your first sucking.
Ladies and gentlemen, he never forgets his first sucking. Dorian Price, how do you do, sir?
Not too bad, boss. How we doing today?
I'm clearly punchy. Speaking of punchy, we have a new woman with us. Woo!
Hello.
They said it couldn't be done, that we could have more than one woman on this network, but by God, we found more token women. Friend of Dorian and now friend of ours. Ladies and gentlemen, hope she'll be a friend of yours. Mick Wanamaker, how do you do, madam?
Hello.
Good
I'm
to
here
have
at
you.
the Milk Bar drinking some Milk Plus. We're ready for the ultraviolence, man.
As we said before the show started, I am ready for a little bit of the ultraviolence and a bit of the in out. Speaking of which, I know I keep saying this, but boy, video. People keep coming up with props, and people are coming, dressed in costume. It's a whole other class of characters here. I want to take a minute, Mick, just kind of introduce you to the world. I know you're one of Dorian's friends, but tell us what brought you here, and especially why you wanted to, of all the shows you could have started on, why you chose the Stanley Kubrick director focus.
Well, I've been watching the podcast for a little bit since I met Dorian, of course, to support the show, but also just watch. And I really like Clockwork Orange. And so he sent me a list and I said that one. And so Clockwork Orange is one of those weird kind of movies that I don't find that a lot of people know about. I'm going to say that cautiously because growing up, I haven't had a lot of people express that they have seen it. But
yeah, it definitely flies under the radar. Some people who are even familiar with the movie don't know that it's adapted from a book. I saw it when I was a child, which tells you more about me than you probably need to know. As I said, my father had a big VHS collection. He would tape stuff off of HBO, and there was always a movie I shouldn't be watching on top of a movie I was trying to watch. So it's I would watch Star Wars, and at the end of Star Wars, it would go into the next movie, and hey, wait a minute, that girl's naked. So I would keep watching. And that's how I discovered A Clockwork Orange. And then ta-da!
I mean, come on. When kids were my age, we weren't looking forward to those HBO free preview weekends for Dream On. It was because we were guaranteed at least 12 hours of real sex.
That's our problem.
And as a kid who in second grade conned his dad into renting RoboCop for him, I was always down for a half-day marathon of real sex.
Have you ever been on a podcast before? Or is this your first one?
This is my first one.
Oh, good God. Well, you're in for a treat. Yeah. All right. So let me go over to you, Dorian. We were just talking about A Clockwork Orange. Like I said, I watched it as a kid. I watched it a bunch, mostly for the gruesome nudity. But I even as a kid, I was like, this is a special kind of movie. This is weird. I saw the Jeremy Irons version of Lolita when I first started collecting DVDs when that was a thing. I'd never seen the Kubrick version. And Eyes Wide Shut, I had heard it was spicy. I had heard, it was like, oh my God, it's the sexiest movie ever. And at the time, I was bored by the whole concept. I'm like, I don't care about this. I've seen so much worse.
May I start things off with a little bit of a hot take?
Sure.
Okay. Twice in his career, Stanley Kubrick tried to make a movie that delved into human sexuality to some extent or another. And I don't think either one was his best work, but in both cases, I don't think he was entirely to blame.
Yeah, we're going to talk at length about that. So back to you, Dorian. Just before I finish up, we did The Shining here on the Radulich Broadcasting Network, and Full Metal Jacket is one of my favorite movies ever, and that's kind of pretty much. Oh, and I did Dr. Strangelove. I watched it with my friends again when we were collecting DVDs. So that's kind of how I came to Kubrick. How about you?
I came to Kubrick first of all through Clockwork Orange. About 13 years ago was the first time I saw it. I was 12 at the time, and I was working a backstage crew, and we had a crew party that I was allowed to go to, which I shouldn't have been allowed to go to because I had my first drink that night because they thought I was 18. But whatevs. But yeah, so I got to see Clockwork Orange, and yeah, it was I remember like loving the movie, not like oh yay, this is awesome. Rape, these people are raping people and beating people up. Hey,
my kind of movie.
Life, finally, somebody gets what I need.
It's like, oh my God, this movie speaks to me. Oh, what have they done to that poor lady?
Right? No, it was like I already wanted to be a filmmaker, so the visuals were striking, and the pacing and everything. The movie was just fantastic, and then I would see The Shining. Actually, excuse me, I correct myself. I saw The Shining first, but I didn't know it was Kubrick.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember being upset because I'd read the book, and I won't get into a whole diatribe on it. If Alexis isn't here for me to fight about that movie with, it's not as fun. She loves The Shining, and I like to fuck with her about it because I don't like the movie adaptation, at least in the story wise. It's a fantastic movie behind the scenes ways. But anyways, so I didn't know that was Kubrick. So again, my first movie that I heard the name Stanley Kubrick was Clockwork Orange. And I would go on then to watch Eyes Wide Shut a few years later. Obviously, Full Metal Jacket. That weird period piece one he did that I never remember the name of.
Barry Lyndon.
Thank you, Barry Lyndon. Yeah. And so I have mixed feelings on him, on his directing style. I will tell this story now just so it doesn't gum up the works later. The funniest thing I've ever heard about Stanley Kubrick came from the director of photography from the Matrix movies. And they were interviewing about the second and the third ones, which were filmed simultaneously. The second and third Matrix movies were filmed simultaneously. And he was like, I remember doing the first one. Everyone was having fun. We didn't know if it was going to work. We were telling a really great story. And somewhere between the wrapping of the first Matrix movie and then going into the second one, both the Wakashis had read either a book by Stanley Kubrick or a quote or somewhere that said, actors don't give you their best performance unless you exhaust them. So you need to push them past their breaking point and just, So Wakashi started doing 100 takes, 112 takes, and the DOP ended the quote with going, "Every day I wanted to find Stanley Kubrick's grave, dig him up, and kick his ass until he was dead again."
Yeah, somewhere out there, Harvey Keitel just said there's a disturbance in the force and punched the mirror. You know what? I think it's funny, Sean. Not a single one of us has yet mentioned 2001: A Space Odyssey.
I was about to get there. I wanted to do this quote first. 2001: A Space Odyssey is one of those movies that, again, much like The Shining, I didn't realize was Kubrick. And much like Full Metal Jacket, I forget that it's Kubrick. 2001: A Space Odyssey is probably one of his best films because it just, everything works so well. His style is there. I feel like there was a producer that had a leash on him and was like, "No, fuck your crazy shit. Just make the goddamn
No,
movie."
Stanley, we don't need 100 takes of Harvey Keitel walking through a door. Just calm the fuck down.
But yeah, I wanted to end with that one because of the movies that are here. I obviously have thoughts. That's why I'm here to talk about them. But I think of his pièce de résistance will always be 2001: A Space Odyssey because it is classic and beautiful.
I haven't seen it. It's one of those ones I want to sit down with Jonas and watch together. Yes, we were talking about Dr. Strangelove before, which I watched with my buddies in 20 years ago. Sean, how'd you come to Kubrick?
So, my sophomore year of high school, I read Clockwork Orange in a matter of a couple of days, and it instantly became one of my favorite books of all time. Still is. And then I found out there was a movie version by this director named Stanley Kubrick that I think I had faintly heard of once or twice from one of the upperclassmen. Not enough to really ooh and ah at the name, but I remember being struck by visually how he interpreted the movie was nothing like how it appeared in my mind. And I'll go into that when we get to the movie. But that was really my first exposure, and it was also, I think, the last Stanley Kubrick movie that I saw for a number of years. And then when I was in college, when Alexis and I were dating, she showed me Dr. Strangelove one night. Absolutely loved it. From there, I saw Full Metal Jacket. I finally got around to seeing The Shining, which is an outstanding horror movie, just not by any stretch of the imagination a good Stephen King movie.
Preach.
Years later, I would finally get around to seeing Eyes Wide Shut, and again, as we'll talk about, I don't think it was a great movie to begin with, but I think it being egregiously mishandled and mismarketed, and I would even say miscast, did not at any point do it any favors. And Mick, Dorian, you both watched the podcast long enough that you know that my thing is, if you're coming to me for scholarly film critique, you're at the wrong end. I am the fan who can tell you what I liked about a movie. I can articulate what a movie made me feel. But if you're looking for real inside baseball takes on mise-en-scène, matching shots, stuff like that. You mentioned 2001: A Space Odyssey. I look at 2001: A Space Odyssey as a good example of the fact that great movies, objectively great movies, are not always fun to watch, and sometimes they can be absolutely, utterly excruciating. I've referred several times over the years to movies that I was glad I experienced them because I got to take in what really was, I had to admit, was a brilliant artistic vision. But once it was over, I vowed to myself, I could die a happy man if I never see this movie again in my life. If I never have to sit there one more solitary time.
I will actually bounce off what you said. Is like, you know, you're the fan. One of the reasons Mark has me on, I'm the film director. I'm in film school, so I can do the whole.
Sure.
He's like, that's my job, so don't even worry about that. But the second thing is, on my crew, Shay, who's been on the podcast as well. We have something in our group of friends, as well the actors and stuff we work with, called the Shay Doctrine. And the Shay Doctrine is this, and it's what you're talking about with 2001: A Space Odyssey. It was beautiful. It was important. Glad I saw it. Hated it.
That is the first movie. The first movie that comes to mind when I think of that is I think of Dances with Wolves.
Right?
I think of the fact that I am so glad I sat down and watched that at least once because it is really some masterful film craft. It's a great story. I have never, since that time I sat down and fully watched it, for this podcast, by the way, had an urge to sit down and watch Dances with Wolves again. And yet, weirdest shit in the world. You want to talk about a movie, a great piece of cinema that I could sit down and probably watch again and again and again. Pat.
Yes.
Legitimate. One of my all-time favorite movies. I will admit, it's long. It's a marathon in and of itself.
I want to read this real quick. Yeah, we got to move this on.
Sorry.
So one of the reasons why we're talking about Kubrick tonight, other than I wanted an excuse to talk about Clockwork Orange, and I wanted an excuse to see Eyes Wide Shut because I hadn't yet. It's really quick, like 50-word reactions to what I'm going to read here. Under the cultural impact part of his wiki, part of the new Hollywood filmmaking wave, which I'm going to go back and say that like late 70s era, like post 60s, late 70s era of filmmakers that came out of Hollywood. It's like just the greatest time to be a movie fan. So the stuff that these guys came up with was pretty brilliant, and let's just say still impactful. But part of the new Hollywood filmmaking wave, Kubrick's films are considered by film historian Michael Cement to be among the most important contributions to world cinema in the 20th century. And he is frequently cited as one of the greatest, most influential directors in the history of cinema. According to film historian and Kubrick scholar Robert Kolker, Kubrick's films were more intellectually rigorous than the work of any other filmmaker. Leading directors including Uncle Marty, Martin Scorsese, Steven Spielberg, Wes Anderson, who wants to show you his list, George Lucas, who used to be a real boy, James Cameron, Terry Gilliam, and the Coen brothers, Ridley Scott and George Romero, have cited Kubrick as a source of inspiration, and additionally, in the case of Spielberg and Scott, collaboration. I'll go to you first, since you've been waiting patiently through all of this, Mick. What do you think about that? Just your quick reaction.
I mean, it makes sense that there's so much inspiration from Kubrick's films, but not only for something that's coming first almost, but also just with different aspects that he would come up with. But I will agree with, I don't know where I'm pointing, that way.
Welcome to the Mirrorverse.
I am definitely just a casual viewer. I always had the attitude of, if a movie's entertaining, I will watch the whole movie, but I might come out of it like, this movie was boring. So as far as the actual camera angles and stuff go, that's his job.
Gotcha. Dorian, your thoughts on Stanley Kubrick's impact before we get into A Clockwork Orange?
Stanley Kubrick has been a big inspiration to me as well. He taught me just from watching his films. He taught me a lot about framing a shot. You know, every frame a painting, which he's very good at. But by the same token, I can be inspired by somebody and learn from them, and very much disagree with them on the way they handle things. You know, again, how he treated his actors and such like that. I believe his movies are some of the most remembered because of how out there they were. You know, they were even, you know, the big ones were art films in their own.
Interject something.
Yeah.
As a mental health professional, I'm very interested in the way people think and why they think the way that they do. It's why I got into the profession in the first place. Kubrick is one of the rare gems in movie making whose brain, you can see how it works through the camera lens. When I mean, especially so this during Eyes Wide Shut, but I was paying attention also during Clockwork Orange and Lolita, where he has definitely got some stuff going on in that brain of his, that beautiful, beautiful mind. And it is brought to life in his camera angles and the way he swings the camera and frames a shot. Like, it really stands apart from most directors that I've paid this kind of a close attention to, because everything he does is so purposeful. It's weird, especially with Eyes Wide Shut. Almost everything almost feels like he's on safari. You know, there's these long takes, you know, these like wide angles, and then he's like zooming in, and it's like you're like, it's almost leering which makes sense for the kind of movie that was. But I noticed it somewhat in Lolita and A Clockwork Orange as well, where he's one of the few guys that really goes out of his way to make you feel like you've entered a new realm of reality. Which I'm going to pitch it over to you, Sean, so that we can wrap this up and get into A Clockwork Orange. Your thoughts on his cultural impact, or anything that I've said or Dorian said?
All right. Well, actually, I think you two said everything else there is to say about his impact as an auteur, the controversies over the egregious, unjustifiable liberties that he took with his actors and crew. So, seeing as tonight we're talking about 3 adaptations, A Clockwork Orange, Lolita, in the case of Eyes Wide Shut, Traumnovelle, I'm going to throw out something that's going to seem kind of niche, but I think it's also kind of important to maybe bring up off and on. And that is the fact that when he adapted something, he had this way of taking the story and really making it his own. And sometimes it was in ways where he interpreted it. And in the case of Clockwork, he was, very much largely by the letter of the source material. In Lolita's case, he moved a couple things around, but they made sense in adapting the medium. And, we'll get to Eyes Wide Shut, but in the case of The Shining, he took a Stephen King classic and twisted it into something else and went, well, that wasn't what I expected of The Shining, but I gotta admit it was good.
I feel like when we did the on trial for The Shining, it was like this was, in terms of an adaptation of the source material, The Shining in name only.
Yeah. It really was. But then again, also look at the fact that ABC did a whole miniseries that was a chapter and verse adaptation of the novel. Which one is more fondly remembered by people? Which one scared more people? It's not even a contest. It's 10-7 rounds across the board.
Yeah, the ABC one just like it got the characters right and lost all the scares, whereas Kubrick one gets all the scares right and fucks the characters directly to hell without a reach around.
Oh, speaking of fucking characters, A Clockwork Orange is a 1971. Master of the segue. A Clockwork Orange is a 1971 dystopian crime film adapted, produced, and directed by Stanley Kubrick, based on the Anthony Burgess's 1962 novel of the same name. It employs disturbing, violent images to comment on psychiatry, juvenile delinquency, youth gangs, and other social, political, and economic subjects in a dystopian near-future Britain. It stars Malcolm McDowell, who you may remember from every villain he's ever played in every movie ever. He plays Alex, and Alex narrates most of the film in Nadsat, a fractured adolescent slang composed of Slavic languages, especially Russian, English, and Cockney rhyming slang. So good. It was made on a budget of $1.3 million. It made $114 million. Today, movie executives would be throwing eyes wide shut parties if their movies made that kind of money on that kind of a budget. To be alive in the 70s making movies. So the basic, I'm not going to read the plot synopsis, but it basically goes like this. Alex leads a street gang. They beat people. They rape people. They do some light stealing, as near as I can tell. Alex looks like he's on probation, and he starts to become a little too abusive to those in his gang, who then turn on him and get him caught during one of their rampages. He is then sent to prison, trying to get his prison sentence commuted early. He volunteers for a reconditioning program where, famously, if you've ever seen this, for those of you who haven't seen this movie, but you've seen this picture of Malcolm McDowell's eyes being held open, being pried open, and being made to watch film. It's like a Pavlovian conditioning to basically make him sick, like Scott Hall to alcohol, every time he sees any kind of violent imagery. But because some of the imagery also employs the use of music, specifically Beethoven, now he can't hear that either without getting violently ill. They run some tests. They do some a bit of pageantry. The board says, "Yep, you seem cured. Lots of luck to you." And they shove him out back into the real world. And this is now years later. He goes back home with his mom and dad and says, "Mom, Dad, I'm cured. Who the fuck is that in my room?" And they said, "Well, that's Georgie. He's part of the family now." And so he leaves. He has no home to go to. He runs afoul of the old man they beat up in the beginning, and he is beat to shit by a bevy of old men. He runs afoul of his old gang members who have now become cops, and they beat the shit out of him. And eventually he ends up at the house of the writer, whom is where the first attack takes place. And when the writer figures out who that is, he's like, there's a whole thing. Eventually Alex ends up being tortured. He throws himself out a window. He ends up in the hospital. At the hospital, I can't remember if it's the governor or somebody high up in politics there basically was like, "Hey, sorry." They're trying to avoid a fiasco with him. So they're like, "What if, we get you a job, we give you some money, we set you up, and you forget this whole unfortunate affair ever happened?" And Alex is
Please no sue. Please no sue.
Yeah. Why don't you just forgive us, and then the whole, be a thing? And Alex says, "Sure." And the movie ends with him having sex in the hospital with these two women. It's great. That is short shrift.
Like, I think we all learned a lesson here.
Yeah.
Did everyone catch the lesson?
It's really short shrift because I don't want to spend 87 years explaining everything that happens in the movie, but it's worth it to go back and watch. But that's the bare bones of it. Before I get into questions and we discuss it as a panel, I don't know if it still exists, but there is an actual Korova milk bar, or there was a Korova milk bar in Manhattan.
Yes.
That have you been there, Dorian? Is it still there?
Yes.
Of course, it would be in Manhattan.
I don't remember if it's still there. I was there about 5 years ago, so I'm actually looking it up right now. Keep talking.
My friends and I, when we discovered that there was a Korova milk bar in Manhattan, we went there quite a bit and had fun. And it's a pretty decent reproduction of the bar from the movie, which feels otherworldly. So
it is closed now, sadly.
It is closed, yeah, as do all things as time marches on. So I'll go to you first, Mick. What do you want to talk about with this movie? Obviously, you've had some positive reaction to it. You came here tonight all dressed up like a droogie.
I fucking hate this movie. What are you doing?
This is the worst movie I've ever seen.
This is how I protest movies. I dress as one of the characters. So tell me your thoughts on this movie. What jumps out at you that you want to tell the world, and avail yourself of your thoughts?
One of my favorite things in movies is if someone can create such a pleasantly visual environment almost.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, you still have normal, like more, I guess I would label as drab scenes, but it only depends on where he is in life. So whenever he's feeling like the height of himself in the beginning of the movie, everything's so colorful, and the milk bar and everything looks weird and fun. And especially my favorite scene is in the record bar. It's because if there was, or just a record store, I should say, if there was a record store like that open, I would love to spend my entire day there.
Did you find the scenery also kind of reflected that changeover over time from the more leftist liberal government in the beginning to the more right-leaning conservative government when Alex gets out?
Yeah, and that's what I was kind of trying to touch on, was just like as the movie goes on, you can see the scene. No, you're fine. No, I'm just reiterating. It's like it really reflects either his mental state of like, oh well, I'm in trouble, and how am I going to get myself out of this? Versus in the beginning where everything seems all colorful because he's getting away with everything. And so, but Mark touched on this. I really like the dialogue. And sometimes I even make fun of it because I'm like, you have no idea what they're saying for the entire 3 hours of the movie.
But it sounds.
If you can't pick it up on it by context, yeah.
Right, but it sounds cool.
It's very unique in cinema history. Where most things are given to the basic language of the time. You're speaking English, speaking Spanish, you're speaking Italian, speaking French. And here, it's more or less English, but he is using slang in a way. It's like, I have a lot of friends who are 10 years younger than me. I work with people who are 10 to 15 younger than me, and sometimes they'll say a slang term, and I'm like, I don't know what you just said, and that's a lot of this movie for me.
I think when it comes to Gen Z in particular, you kind of have to treat the slang like you're listening to Nat.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
Really lame Nat.
I think Mick's point about, and it's something that I was touching on before with Kubrick, Dorian, is how even though this is supposed to be near future from the 70s England, it still feels like a whole other world. You know, this feels like this was inhabited by the characters in Guardians of the Galaxy, not not British street thugs.
Guardians of A Clockwork Orange.
Yeah.
Coming soon from Disney.
And one of the things that lends credence to that is the way he shoots things. I'll give you an example. Something we can kick the conversation this way. The second home invasion scene where he gets caught. Where it's the one lady doing what appears to be some sort of yoga. The way Stanley shoots it using some like wide angles, you know, there's a lot of space in what he's doing. Like, if you've ever gone to like one of the like modern art museums, and the way like there's like a little bit of color on a big white canvas, and this is meant to interpret something or other.
Provoke emotion, yeah.
Yeah, Kubrick kind of shoots the same way. You know, we start as a wide angle, and then it kind of focuses on this one person or this one object, and we just sort of like follow that, you know, as it leaves the room. And it just gives you the sense that this doesn't take place in our reality. So one of the things about A Clockwork Orange is that while the themes of it speak to things that are very real, you know, what do we do about people who are antisocial? This is the word we would use now. What are we doing with people who, you know, with these deep-seated personality and behavioral issues? You know, do we try to rehabilitate them? Are they can they be rehabilitated? These are all important questions. But it also makes it seem like it's science. Like, you would almost be tricked into thinking Clockwork Orange is science fiction. That's how this thing is shot.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Again, the remember one of the shots is what I call the fishbowl shot. He's got a very extremely wide lens going on during one of the attacks, and one of the things that I think was great about it is it makes you feel like you're mentally being attacked too. And
I know exactly the shot you're talking about.
Right. And it's a high angle shot down, and even the spinning around shots that they do.
Oh, and he's got the giant penis, and they're doing that. I don't even mean giant penis. Of course you would bring that up. But no, but that
okay. Big. Who had 33 minutes before Mark said giant penis? Was it you?
He's actually running behind by my estimate.
Can we get through one show where he doesn't?
He's about 8 minutes late.
But yeah, no, it's those shots like that, and again, I'm gonna bounce off because again, it was right in my notes as well here. Was that one of the cool things about the movie that I really appreciate is that it is a very bleak and horrific thing that we are going through, you know, and the scenery is just, it's in like, you know, the way the house looks, the way they're dressed, you know, the colors and stuff like that. It's beautiful. Like it's almost something like out of the 40s Wizard of Oz when she's come to Oz, and it's colorful and it's bright and, you know, all that. And again, with such horrific, you know, story tones to it, obviously, what's happening. And the thing that gets me is that this movie truly shows that Stanley Kubrick, I really don't think he should have been fully a director. Honestly, had he been a director of photography and then had like worked with like Scorsese or Spielberg, all of them, you know, Spielberg's movies, whoever's movies he ended up working on would have gone up several notches from the great they already were because of his ability with that camera, his eye. But in this case, what I will say is that as a director, he does crack his knuckles really hard on this one in blocking along with his shots. The blocking of and the movement of the characters becomes a character itself, and you're able to see that arc through the movements. Like when he's gotten too rough with his gang, he comes down the stairs, and even though he's standing above them, there's this predatory sense to the rest of the droogs of you can almost tell what's coming if you read the room. Like they're done. You know, this plan's already been made. they're just waiting for the opportune moments. The blocking helps with that as well as the dialogue and the acting. So yeah, this movie again and is a masterclass. Again, in school we my film school, New York Film Academy, they teach this movie about with blocking and cinematography. I mean, as well with The Shining, but this one has some shots that are just so unique but so perfect to the movie itself. And I'll end with this. One of the best shots, and it's been used in a whole bunch of trailers and stuff like that, is the Dutch angled shot of Alex driving the car. Mm-hmm. That shot alone, with then you have to be any dialogue or music, conveys his madness and the state of his mind so well that it's like, as a filmmaker, to learn from that, and find those shots, because that was Kubrick's power.
Sean, your thoughts on A Clockwork Orange?
So, first off, while we're talking about the visual style, I believe that a lot of directors, in fact, every successful director, I believe, has something that they stand out as doing just almost preternaturally well. It's not always even visual. For Kevin Smith, it was undoubtedly dialogue. Mel Gibson has a real finesse for story structure. I love the way that in horror, James Wan almost never has a fake out jump scare. It's almost always just something that's right there and it's paid off legitimately in the moment. I could go on with more and more, but you get the point. One of the things that I love about the way Stanley visually built this movie was I saw this just to paint a picture. I'm 41 years old. I saw this in the back half of the 90s when I was in high school. And so when I read the book and I recognized that this was dystopian, kind of near future, I had a very different aesthetic that was kind of painted in my mind of what that future would look like. Because, and I think this is the beauty of literature sometimes, is the fact that it really does become timeless, because that was the time in which I was living. And so that was my impression of what that future would be. It would be something that would probably be very kind of cyberpunk more than anything else, or Spider-Man 2099, or maybe a more modern Gotham City, something like that. What I didn't expect, what really threw me off, but did it in the best way because it really conveyed the intended setting of the novel, was the fact that, especially initially, everything was so sparse. Everything a lot of it did just feel so sterile white, so pristine, because it's so jarringly contrasted with Alex and his gang's brutality. It's a sense where you can film a scene like Fight Club, where you have an absolutely monkey butt ugly beatdown that's taking place in the seedy basement of a bar, and you're comfortable with it because you're thinking, yeah, that makes sense. I could see that. That probably kind of belongs in the setting. But then you're looking at this squeaky clean white living room where this horrendous assault and this rape are taking place in this seemingly otherwise flawless environment to these supposedly flawless people. When he was on, he really had a way of taking you out of your comfort zone with moments, and he did it in The Shining too, with moments that made you uncomfortable because that, to every part of you that was reasonable, just understood that didn't belong in that particular setting. And that was what threw you. Not that it was happening on a pile of bones, but the fact that it was happening in a shuttered, clean, well-maintained resort hotel. And I think that's what I love most about the entirety visually of the movie, is the fact that he plays with setting like that, and the fact that the way he shoots, whether it's the fear that's conveyed through the intensity of that fisheye shot, or pretty much the entire back half of the movie where we're really seeing the world through Alex's newly terrified eyes, it doesn't allow you to get away from the feel of the moment. There is no escape. You are confronted with the terror of this horrible, cynical hypocrisy of human conditioning, pretty much from start to finish. I love that.
I want to end the discussion with this. So obviously Malcolm McDowell's performance is stellar.
Oh, yeah.
Without saying.
Absolutely.
Preach.
My favorite.
If you don't mind me, would you mind if I threw in one thing, a little bit of trivia, since I never do this anymore?
Sure.
We almost got a version of this movie where Alex was played by Mick Jagger, the rest of his gang was played by the Stones, and it was going to be scored by the fucking Beatles. And it wasn't that there was even a creative issue. It was just the fact that the rights got tied up, and in the interim, it just kind of fell into Kubrick's lap.
What a hard right turn that is from the Beatles and Beethoven. So what I was trying to get at was, and the last point that I wanted to throw out for discussion, then we're moving on. So obviously Malcolm McDowell's performance is stellar in this. We all agreed on that. We were all just saying yes to it. But I'll tell you, this isn't held up on his shoulders alone. Everybody in this gives good performance, but that's not what I want to talk about. There's a Kubrickism that I noticed in these three movies about the kinds of performances that you get. And it's maybe not every single character, but there's always at least one. Here, it's the guy playing, and I just had it. It's the guy playing PR Deltoid, I believe, Aubrey Morris. Him on the couch going, "Oh, you would have been nastiness, Alex. Oh, you would have being a bad boy, Alex. Oh, you wouldn't want to get me in trouble because it's a great thing for you, Alex."
You go, yes.
I want to get him, Peter Sellers, James Mason, and and the guy yelling at Tom Cruise. You made me look like an asshole in front of these people. I want to get them on a podcast and have them talk about McDonald's hamburgers or some shit. Because there would be Peter Sellers like,
in character.
Peter Sellers like, I ate a burger and the burger made me sweaty and it was very greasy and I didn't understand. Did you get a bit of the sauce? Did you, Peter Sellers? It's going on and on and on. I was in the bathroom taking a shit. That's what happened to me. That would be the podcast. It would be amazing.
And we'd retire directly afterwards because we're never topping that.
Yeah, no, it's that. Jesse takes the BDSM quiz, and I'm done with the podcasting. Him on the it's so memorable because there's like so many Alex kicking the guy to Singing in the Rain. The stuff that's set to Beethoven. There's so many like musical cues and notes, and you can get wrapped up in just Alex's delivery because it's so out of this world and so alien. But then you get that performance, and you're like, no one talks this way. No one. And it's like, Alex. And it's like, nobody else in the movie is doing this. Like, where did you? And the fact that Kubrick and Mick, then Dorian, then Sean can back clean up. But the fact that he that was more than one take. It was done purposely. And Kubrick was like, that's what I want out of you. You just sound like a complete asshole. And we're going to leave it in. And it's like, yeah, this is totally a Kubrick thing. So so the topic is performance. That's what I focused on. Your thoughts, madam?
Oh, absolutely. No, everyone's performance in this movie and yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Doing that at work now. Did you get your notes? Yes, I was sitting in the office all by myself. Yes, no one was talking to me. It was wonderful.
Another one that sticks out to me. It's such a small role in the movie, but that when he's getting checked into the prison and he has to empty his pockets, it's just pure general. Just like one chocolate bar. One pack of cigarettes.
I would have bet my daughter's life that was John Cleese.
Yes, yes. Manuel.
In a weird way, it reminds me so much of Frank Oz in the opening of Blues Brothers.
Dude, I was just about to say that. You beat me by like 2 seconds.
Keep going.
Prophylactic,
Black.
soiled.
But every character just seems so outworldly, which makes the whole thing work because no one is left behind in that.
Right. It is kind of like a drama exercise where the instruction was do a character, and no one's doing the same character, and it's like no one would put these characters together because they're all from different corners of the earth, but somehow they came together and did a battle royal, and at the end of it, Shawn Michaels won. Speaking of which, Dorian, your thoughts on performances and how odd they are.
The performances in this are fantastic, as we've already said. And you're right, Malcolm McDowell does not, excuse me, I'm so sorry, hold this on his shoulders at all. Everyone's pulling their weight. Even the background characters are on. I can name probably on one hand the movies where I felt like the extras were not just people who had been hired and be like, stand in the background, do something, don't suck focus.
I got the writer when Alex is singing in the rain in the bath, and he's making I just took a dump in my pants face. What again? Kubrick didn't just like, I don't know what he's doing. Just leave it. We gotta go. We did this on a budget of $150. No, he purposely told him to do that and kept it in the movie doing this.
I shit my pants and I'm happy about it.
Yeah, all of it purposeful. Keep going.
But yeah, no, it's the background characters feel like they're alive. They're a part of the world, and that's sometimes the hardest thing to accomplish in a film is getting your extras involved. And because it's like a gauge. Too little, it doesn't look like they're there at all, other than be like, "Hi, Mom, I'm in a movie. Hello." Too much, it's like I'm on stage and I'm projecting to the back row. It's like, dude, your job is to hold a fucking tray and have the lead character take a glass and then pivot and leave. Calm down there, Pavarotti. Yeah, fuck. Sorry. That's repressed memories from doing crew on stage.
I'm putting that on a t-shirt. Calm down, Pavarotti, you fuck.
We are not all Tim Curry.
Right. Hashtag Dorian Price 2024. But no, it's, again, as a director myself, I really take a masterclass from the direction and that what the actors did, because it did feel like Kubrick loosened the reins a little bit, whether that was from the producers, the execs, whatever, because it feel like, with watching the rest of Malcolm McDowell stuff or watching some of the things that the other lead characters did in, which I'm not going to go through because that's a whole freaking IMDb page that could take a podcast itself. But you notice that this level that they brought to Clockwork Orange was not just Stanley Kubrick's genius and his direction. It was their own acting skill, coming forward and them being able to make choices and move with those choices, and Kubrick directing the choices that they did make, which can be the hardest thing sometimes with actors, is that trying to find actors that share your vision, but also have their own ideas and motivations, what they want to do with the character, and being able to meld those two together. And I found that a lot of directors that I've worked with, either as like director of photography or, as their first AD, even before I started directing my own stuff, would have issues with that. And this movie truly shows that if you work with your actors and you pick good ones, you get a masterpiece. And every performance in this, even if you can't name the character, if we held up a picture, be like, oh yeah, that dude who's like, yes, Alex,
like any good relationship, it begins with trust and faith in your partner. If you don't have that, you got nothing, Shawn. Take me home, baby doll.
I think we've covered about everything as far as character goes. So I'll kind of segue a little bit with this one thing. And it's actually kind of one of the few I wish we could have gotten moments from one of my favorite movies. And that is, I wish Kubrick would have shot the 21st chapter of the British version of the book, so that way we could have seen Malcolm's full range from playing, the unhinged Droog to the whipped puppy cowering under the master's leash, and then coming back around to having a moment of clarity, and then pivoting into a quieter, more civil life of his own accord, not because anyone made him, but just because one night in the Korova Milk Bar, the pieces just all came together for him. I think that would have been a truly brilliant, and
from a therapeutic standpoint, that is the only way people heal is by their own volition.
Well, yeah, exactly. And I have to imagine it's the ending that Anthony Burgess would have preferred to have seen of the movie. But other than that, I'm going to close on, and that's the fact that I'm fond of kind of trotting out and paraphrasing the Dave Grohl quote. You can sing a song out to 10,000 people, and they'll sing it back to you for 10,000 different reasons. And it's because one of the things I love about this movie so much, as far as interpreting its story, is it reminds me of Taxi Driver in the way that the more people you talk to about it, the more narrative threads and themes and underlying commentaries and whatnot you're going to hear. And some of them are going to be absolutely of the directors and writers and actors' intent, but some of them are just really interesting, not necessarily invalid projection. And in my case, I'm going to throw one out there that, again, I referred to a kind of cynical hypocrisy. And that's the fact that Alex and the Droogs, when they're going out and raising 50 shades of mayhem around the city and making ultra violence without conscience, they're enemies of the state. But look at the gang. The instant they're kind of in the state's employ, well, all of a sudden their brand of brutality is just hunky-dory because it's serving us. And this is a movie that really kind of came out at the right time, because in 1971, youth violence was a particularly big issue. It was a particularly big media inflated fear. It's kind of like how I made the comment on Facebook of, gee, you ever wonder why punks in 80s movies are always portrayed as the villains? Think about it. It's the 80s. How do you think multi-billion-dollar studios were going to portray anarchic, in the anarchic punks who were all about raising up the disenfranchised and the marginalized? So it's kind of the same thing here, except the theme that you get is, I feel like when it comes to the state especially, it's very much a theme of, wait a second, they can't do that to our pledges. Only we can do that to our pledges.
Thinking, not that we don't like violence, we just have to be wearing the right uniform.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Ultra violence is not the answer until it's our answer.
Yeah. Right.
Even when you're kind of looking at kind of the denouement of the movie, and I'll just kind of close on this, the state had absolutely no problem reaching their fingertips into Alex's head and playing cat's cradle with his gray matter. But then the instant someone that Alex wronged takes matters into their own hands and decides to balance the books, hey, can't do that.
Yeah.
It's not okay. You're evil. Stop being evil. So,
how does I do?
Yeah, rules for thee, but not for me.
We could honestly, we could have done it on trial on this. This could have been its own podcast, because we stuck strictly to film craft, which is fine, but there was so much going on. Like Jesse and I, for 5 seasons and 5 podcasts, talked about The Wire, and we spent a lot of time talking about the very issues this movie raises, and that is another hours of discussion. So we're gonna move on, and we're gonna move on to Lolita, the 1962 version, which is a black comedy psychological drama directed by the aforementioned Kubrick, based on the 1955 novel of the same name by Vladimir Nabokov. It was made for a budget of about $2 million. It was also successful fairly speaking. It made $9.2 million. It's got a little bit of controversy. I'll share this with everyone. A 2020 article by journalist Sarah Weinman alleges that Harris, the producer of the movie, had sex with Lyon during the shooting of the film when she was 14 years old, although Lyon had remained silent regarding the rumors for many years. When asked for a statement on the planned remake of the film in 1996, she had stated, "My destruction as a person dates from that movie. Lolita exposed me to temptations no girl of that age should undergo. I defy any pretty girl who was rocketed to stardom at 14 in a sex nymphet role to stay on the level path thereafter." The movie is about, how do I put this? A middle-aged literature lecturer who writes as Humbert, as he has hemophilia. He is sexually infatuated with young adolescent Dolores Hayes, whom he calls Lolita. The film stars James Mason as Humbert, Shelley Winters as Mrs. Hayes, Peter Sellers as Quilty, and Sue Lyon in her film debut, and what a film debut it was, as Dolores Lolita Hayes. The novel was considered unfilmable when Kubrick acquired the rights around the time of its U.S. publication. Owing to restrictions imposed by the Motion Picture Code, the film toned down the most provocative aspects. We'll talk about how he manages to do that, sometimes leaving much of the audience's imagination. It polarized critics with its themes of child sex abuse, but was nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay at the 35th Academy Awards. Years after its release, Kubrick expressed doubt that he would have attempted to make the film had he fully understood how severe censorship limitations on it would be. Regardless, the film has since received critical acclaim, and in the late 1990s, British director Adrian Lyne directed it to the big screen, and that was the Jeremy Irons version. So, again, I've seen that one. I didn't watch this one until we were going to watch it for the podcast. It was a movie that I was interested in because, like I said, I'd seen the Jeremy Irons version of it, and it's interesting. There's a movie I'm going to talk about, if not later this year, then sometime next year. It was a remake of a French movie called, French movie called Blame It on Rio, which I also watched as a kid. And it's about, an elder man falling in love with, a young, depending on which version of the story, adolescent or, teenage girl. It's definitely a theme that rears its head throughout our culture, and handled in a variety of different ways. So, just a quick round of table, and we'll get into what this movie actually is. Mick, had you heard about Lolita? Did you know anything about it? Any sort of preconceptions before you got into the movie, and then thought to yourself, "What the hell is he asking me to watch here?"
I knew it was a book, and I knew it was a movie. I hadn't read the book, and I hadn't watched the movie until I had to for the podcast. I haven't even seen that 90s version either. But it was a movie. Just saying.
People are definitely film doing things.
With what you were saying about how that kind of concept kind of rears itself into our culture every once in a while, I think it is definitely something that needs to be talked about. And if that's in a way that people are only going to pay attention to it in a movie, then sure. But,
Okay. Dorian, you're anything about Lolita before we came to the podcast?
Well, yeah, and I'm sorry, I'm gonna bring the party way down with this one, but
Here we
because
go.
well, no, because it's important to this. When I was 14, I was molested and raped by an older person, and was taken advantage of through manipulation and grooming. So this movie, when I signed on for this podcast, I really wanted to talk about Clockwork Orange, obviously, and Eyes Wide Shut, because both are movies that I enjoy. This one I'd never seen for obvious reasons, because I was expecting it to piss me off because of my own experiences, which again, I'm not going to dig into that too deep because I don't want to bum the entire podcast out. But as a rape victim myself, who was around the same age as Lolita's supposed to be, I was expecting this to be darker and again, to piss me off. And again, I'll get into it more when we're talking about the movie. It didn't, but that's not a bad thing.
Okay. Also, appreciate you being brave and telling that part about yourself. Thank you for that. Sean, Lolita.
And this is going to sound sarcastic and cynical, and maybe that's kind of how I mean it, but I feel like the tight rating constraints that Kubrick would later say he regretted so much and made him regret even, sometimes regret even filming it, I think are probably because it's early 60s Hollywood. They didn't want anything that might give some people an inkling to look a little too closely at something.
I was gonna say
They really didn't want that.
We're gonna get things like Boys Don't Cry years later, so life changes.
Yeah. Well, but exactly I believe that this is a movie that unfortunately I think Stanley really meant well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he could have done something truly much more brilliant, visceral, and very bluntly honest along the lines of maybe something like Full Metal Jacket, had he been allowed to make this movie in the right era of something like Taxi Driver, or like Boys Don't Cry. Anything like I think if he got to make it nowadays in the era of movies like It Ends With Us and TV series like The Handmaid's Tale, I think he would have had a lot fewer handcuffs, and he would have said what he needed to say in no uncertain terms. As it stands, I still think it's an excellent movie. I still think it's one that's absolutely worth watching. And believe it or not, I found it being one that I wanted to really watch over again, just so I could take it in as a fan, instead of trying to get ready for a podcast.
Let me throw this out there real quick. If she's not 14, what this movie ends up being about is much more interesting, and I think has a lot more to say. The problem is she is 14, and everything else he is saying about the human condition and the way people interact and behave and whatnot kind of gets eaten up by that. Her being 14, him being a hebephile, kind of sucks all the air out of the room. Because I'm watching this movie, and again, I'm trying not to get too far ahead of myself here, but so I'm going to round back to this. But this movie ends up being a lot about narcissism and control. And if you forget that she's 14 and just kind of focus on that, it's this sort of, the tale of this tragic relationship that goes into the ditch because, both of them are, so distinctly personality disordered, and, what hath God wrought? The problem is you're telling that story with a middle-aged man and a 14-year-old girl, and you're like, well, there's no getting around that now. And everything else that is going on in this movie sort of pales in comparison to that, which is kind of an unfair thing. And I think there are people, European people watching this going, yeah, why are you so much focused on that, America? You can focus on this other stuff. It's fine. But we're not French. We're a little obsessed with this sort of thing. All right, let me get into the plot, such as it is. We open the movie with James Mason, who I swear to God, every time he talked, all I thought about was like, this is like Dorian or Eddie Izzard, one of the two. So he walks in and he finds a drunken Peter Sellers, as you would find Peter Sellers. And after Peter Sellers just does the most wonderful cat and mouse game with him, James Mason shoots him in the head. Like you do.
Shoots him in the leg, shoots him in the side, shoots him in the chest, then shoots him in the head.
Yeah. Just to make sure I got him. So anyway.
Rule 2, double tap.
So we go all the way back to the beginning of this story, which is James Mason is looking for some lodging. He moves into the house of Shelley Winters, who you may remember from Pete's Dragon. Oh boy. And she has a 14-year-old daughter. And Shelley.
This is have good luck with kids.
Yeah, really. Stop giving Shelley Winters children.
If you think about it, we could solve 90% of the problems if we just don't give her kids.
Yeah, exactly. Damn, Shelley Winters in a poor parenting. Anyway, so
sorry, Shelley Winters, you're probably a wonderful person.
And I swear to God, that's what Lolita needed, was an imaginary dragon that helps little boys. Anyway, moving on. So he gets there, and Shelley Winters is hot. He's a single man, and that's all we need right now. She's hot to trot. She's trying to get him to make her his wife, and he has eyes on the daughter. And eventually, she figures that out and ends up committing suicide. which then leads to James Mason taking Lolita on the run. They move to the town where he's lecturing at, and they are posing as father and daughter, but all the while they are, and it's heavily implied by the movie, but nothing is ever actually shown, but they are having a sexual relationship. Okay. Over the course of living in this place, whether it's because it's like, hey, don't be dumb, you're gonna get us caught, you idiot, or it's, hey, I like you, nobody else should like you, and I don't like the fact that I'm not giving you all the attention, and vice versa. Trouble is brewing between these two. And then so we have the Peter Sellers character, who shows up as the weirdest German psychiatrist you've ever saw, who's like, hey, you can't control this little girl, you got to let her go out and do things. This goes on for a little while.
Fuck as much as she wants, because psychologically it's how you grow.
Yeah. Yeah, during a character from Hogan's Heroes. Anyway. So
I know
they get into the two of them get into a fight, and Lolita at this point has just about had it with old man Mason, which then alerts the neighbors that something may be wrong, in the state of Denmark. So they go on the run again, and eventually Lolita gets free from James Mason, and it's years apart now. She ends up writing him and saying, hey, I am married, I'm going to have a kid, we're kind of running out of money, will you please come visit, please send more money. So he goes to visit her, and that's when she reveals that not only was she having a sexual relationship with James Mason, but she was actually having a sexual relationship with all 76 of Peter Sellers' characters in this movie. So, and James Mason sort of loses his mind a little bit. It ends with
you do.
Yeah, it ends with him like just giving her the money, but then like running away, and that's what leads him to wanting to kill Peter Sellers from the beginning of the movie. All right, before I go over to you, Mick, I just want to give my thoughts here real quick, and then I'll pepper in stuff as we talk about it. This has all the Kubrickisms that we talked about with A Clockwork Orange. It has great performances. It has funny performances. James Mason, and this just may be the way the man acts, does not talk the way humans talk. And it feels like sometimes he's the only one in this movie. Like, everybody else is there doing a thing and acting like humans. And there's James Mason from planet Neptune. Like, what the fuck? Where did you come from? And he's only to be outdone by Peter Sellers, who's like, I'm going to be the Pink Panther one day, but for now, watch me do 800 characters like I'm Eddie Murphy in a fat suit or some shit. It's just like, this is a busy movie.
No, Peter Sellers in this movie feels like what it would have been like to hang out with Robin Williams when he was super fucking high on cocaine.
Yeah, this was
Not
like if somebody...
Robin Williams in his living room, fucking high on cocaine, being like, so I talk like this, and like you might think I'm a suspicious person, but you could think that because and it's like, Robin, just drink some freaking water, bro.
This movie comes across like if you shoved a camera inside of Robin Williams' brain while he was recording Reality, What a Concept. Go ahead, Sean.
Peter Sellers, I think, is alongside Lon Chaney and Lon Chaney Jr. as easily 3/4 of the Rushmore of great characters.
Yeah. So,
like the all time, like the ones who elevate it to an absolute mystical art.
Sean, you've heard me use this before, where some things come across like a TNA backstage promo, where everyone's talking over each other and no one's making a lick of sense, and you can't understand shit. And then they all walk away in a different directions. And then Scott Steiner wants to tell you about his math problems. That's this movie for me. And a lot of there's some quiet moments, but like a lot of the early stuff with Shelley Winters, where everyone's just talking over each other, and then James Mason's like, just sounds like he's got a migraine. Like, I don't understand why is this happening in this movie, and Shelley Winters is running around, and it sounds terrible, but it's a sight to behold.
I have a gun now, and it will come in handy later in the movie. Got that, audience? Cool.
All the credit in the world to Stanley Kubrick for taming this 3-ring circus he called a movie. That being said, I just wanted to throw that out there, that performance-wise, dialogue, readings, it's all so wonderfully bizarre. The other thing about it, and again, going back to A Clockwork Orange, there's a lot of lovingly longing, gazing shots with the camera. I mean, it's for a black and white movie, it is beautifully shot. it's a little hard to tell at times with some of the costuming, but they really do some interesting things with Dolores's costumes, the way they shape her body, to where there is the tacit recognition she is a 14-year-old girl, and there's only so much you can do, especially in 1962. But still, subtlety. There's a lot of subtlety in this movie. It's probably it's weirdly one of the more subtle movies I've ever seen, and that is to its credit. So this is some of the things I wanted to throw out there. Any one of them you can grab on or add your own there. Mick, what'd you think of Lolita?
So, I actually have a direct quote from Dorian after we watched this movie, from Peter. And
how do I get out of this chicken shit outfit?
We both thought, oh my fucking God, shut up.
And when Peter Sellers is on the porch of that hotel, he's talking, I literally reached over, grabbed her notebook, and wrote down, "Oh my Peter Sellers dash! Oh my fucking God!
Can I
shut
tell
up!"
you, I have been James Mason in that scene more times in my life than I care to count. Where
I think we broke Sean.
Kill him. Shut up! Oh my God! I don't want to be here. I did not sign up for your TED Talk. Shut up!
Just that minute-long tangent that he goes on is so hard to listen to, and it's awful.
It's like the dialogue reading equivalent of someone trying to get out of a tight parking spot.
Yes.
It's going back and forth, and you're never going anywhere. And it's like, this is taking forever.
Mark, my fellow historian of Animaniacs, you know what it made me think of?
What did it make you think of, Sean Comer?
It made me think, and maybe you know the details of this short better than I do, but the short where Yakko, Wacko, and Doc are crashing the studio event, and they get roped in to this one endless conversation with the Ben Stein voice character. Yeah. And Wacko at one point, because I have used this line with this exact delivery, just goes, "Go away."
Go ahead. Go, Nick.
But the movie overall, I felt like was okay. The costumes really felt 50s to me, and even with talking about the girl's character in general, that would definitely be more of a youthful fit. And as the movie goes on, she has a little bit more elements of more adult aspects to her outfit. Just, I think as the movie progresses, he's forcing her into that role where it's like, well, I'm going to make you a woman kind of thing.
Right.
It's the group.
But how big, one of the things I pointed out was how big her petticoat was. That was very if you're a teen, you want your petticoat to be as big as possible because you want the big twirl and everything like that. And so everyone's was very, each person's costume related to who they were as a character. And so with the professor, he's very smart. He had the tweed jacket, which is something, everyone can get that from just looking at him. And then with the mother, she's like the hopeless widow. And so she has kind of a more sexier outfit because she's trying to get into this guy's pants.
Yeah, I was going to say, she's wearing leopard print. She might as well be a sign that says, "Hey, bang me."
Exactly. Also, one other thing I wanted to point out that I thought was a little funny is there was innuendos, whether they meant to or not, throughout the whole movie. And one of my favorite ones was Camp Climax. When she gets sent to summer camp, it's literally called Camp Climax.
I thought you were half going to say sandwich with extra mayo, just like you like it.
I tell you, I was definitely picked, especially during the party scene with all the adults early on in the movie. I kept getting oh, this is like a silent swinger town. It's not something that they talk about openly, but deep down they're all fucking each other. And James Mason just figured that out.
The starting gun for the innuendos, though, has to be when he's he agrees to live there after he's seen Lolita in her two-piece bathing suit outside. She's like, "Well, what was it that won you over? Oh, what was it? Was it my garden? I think it was your cherry pie." And it was like,
and
you know what you did, James Mason. You know what you did.
And in walks the band Warrant. It's
right.
Like, "What are you doing here, Warrant? A brief cameo. She's marching."
Say their name and they appear.
Thank you, Joe.
It's like Beetlejuice. We said the song's name too many times.
They just pop out. No, with Kubrick's way of shooting, though, I noticed a lot of foreshadowing that he deliberately used in order to be like, Peter's our guy. I forgot his actual character name.
Quilty.
Yeah, Quilty. No, he after he after our beloved main male character sniffs the pillow of her bedroom,
She said
it
the
slowly
British
pans to a poster on the wall, which is Quilty. And then that's when my brain started figuring out, like, these things are happening and this is being done on purpose.
That's him. That's the man.
But Humbert is, now that I'm remembering character names, Humbert, I called the fact that he was going to sniff the pillow. As soon as he walked into that little girl's bedroom, I was like, he's going to sniff her pillow.
Yeah. Gross.
Gross.
Right? But I feel like, how am I going to phrase this? This is a delicate way I have to say this, because I feel like there isn't a lot that he could have done because of the rules and regulations of how to shoot the movie. But I feel like there is too much left to the audience imagination, just because, and I'm not saying like actually deliberately shoot these things. Like, I don't want to see that. I think that'd be disgusting.
Sure.
But like, just add a little bit more maybe in the dialogue to be like, because otherwise, if you're a person who's just casually watching this, how many times in those moments could you think, oh, this is just the stepdad, and he does care for her, and they're going on vacation?
Yeah, if you weren't sitting down and watching the movie, if you were just walking in and out, like, you were cooking dinner and it was on, you would have thought that you had caught parts of a melodrama about like, oh, well, a mom died and a stepfather and his daughter have to like move past it and try to have
Driving west. What are you watching? The Grapes of Wrath? Kind of.
And like, I'm not saying it has to be shot, like the whole thing needs to be shot in the way like, oh, this is what's actually happening. But sometimes audience needs a little bit more in order to really get there.
Yeah. It'd be interesting to see what you can do now with, not having nearly the amount of limitations. But I would almost be afraid that this would get too gross. Like this, I don't know. We live in a world where we also had kids and Boys Don't Cry and the Basketball Diaries and a lot of really horrible stuff that we've seen on film. So I don't know if I want to see a 2024 version of Lolita.
Probably not, honestly.
Yeah, I think that's what you get sent to hell for. All right, speaking
of
Dorian.
No, you sick Dutch bastard.
All right, what do you want to talk about with this movie, Dorian?
Well, again, this movie to me, just from a filmmaker's point of view, it really felt like a 40s or like early 50s movie to me. Just the way it moved, the music and stuff like that, which there's nothing wrong with. It was just like, man, this was made in the 60s, but it still feels like, this is like a 40s some odd, 40s, 50s movie.
Has that Wizard of Oz feel to it.
Yeah, just like that. And that's one of the weird things I've been talking a lot about Stanley Kubrick's shooting style and like, usually how he gets with his production designers. And I know this is really early in his career. This is the most flat, uninteresting looking Stanley Kubrick movie I have ever seen.
Do you think that was done purposefully?
I wish I could say yes, because it's like, okay, I've got so much drama going on screen. I can't have them wondering like, what the fuck's going on in the background? Like, with Clockwork Orange, like even just looking at Mick's, background she's got now, there's so much going on there,
right?
But so it just, that's not a critique. That's more of a, that's weird. But as always, James Mason is just bringing the heat in this movie, as he brings with everything. And it's like, yes, hi, James Mason. I'm in love with my daughter.
I haven't seen a guy made of so much slime since the last time I watched Swamp Thing. He is gross in this movie.
Oh yeah, no, he's just so creepy. And it gets like, it's so funny because like the last thing I watched him in was because I rewatched Salem's Lot here recently, where he plays basically the Renfield, like kind of main villain before the big fire shows up. But yeah, I had forgotten he was in this, and when it popped up James Mason, I was like, oh god, here we fucking go. Like, because it was when like the Lolita has Jeremy Irons, I'm like, okay, Jeremy Irons can bring that creep factor, sure. Because he's Jeremy Irons, he's done, he did it with Scar, just with his voice and stuff like that. But I was like, how is James Mason gonna? Holy shit, you did it! But honestly, in somewhat the storytelling of this movie, I felt that it was too long and plotted a little. It's like the movie to me felt like a bad vacation story that was told by the friend of a friend who had heard the vacation story.
So you know how I was telling you I want to eventually like shoot like an office scene full of full of women who one person states something, the next person says what, repeat, and then the third, and then it just keeps going like that, where it's like if you cut the extraneous repeating of the story and asking stupid questions, you would have like it would be only a minute of dialogue as opposed to 5 hours.
Right.
Same thing with a Kubrick movie. If you cut the amount of times they have to repeat each other before they actually move on to the next beat, this movie would have been 20 minutes.
You're lying to me. I'm not lying to me. You are lying to me. I'm not lying to you. Okay. I'm about to throw down my Peter Sellers rule on you. Oh my God, shut the fuck up.
You just want to scream like, give it to me in 10 words or less, or fuck off.
With the performances, I really wish there had been more time given to Quilty to build his character, because it felt like even the first scene, I'm like, am I supposed to hate you? And the problem was, even by halfway through it, I mean, Peter Sellers is standing there looking kind of creepy with his like vampira fucking girlfriend he's got going on next to him the entire movie. Like, she's intense. She's like the whole movie. She's like, that's her face. But sunglasses wouldn't have made it work. But no, it's like I really wish more time had been given to like expand his character and make us dislike him a little more, other than his "oh my God, fucking God, shut up" moments. But Lolita, and again, I give the actress a break, because again, she was 14 and 15 at the time of filming. But this is something I'm going to flick Kubrick for: is she doesn't act like a teenager, in my opinion. She acts like an old man telling someone how a teenager acts.
Okay. I didn't want to get into it now. I'm gonna drop a beat, and then you're gonna blink twice at me, and we'll come back to it later. What she's acting like is this may be a little bit in my own stuff. Maybe I'm projecting, but middle-aged, narcissistic, personality disordered woman.
Okay, yeah.
I saw too much of that. It was way too familiar, and I'm like, oh God, I know you. Ugh, get down, vampire.
Red alert, Sulu, reverse. All hands to battle stations.
I almost cowardly lying myself out the fucking window. I was like, oh God, not you again.
It's like, no, I don't care. Like, I don't care about you. Whatever. I hate you. I love you.
Yeah.
But,
ow. Oh God, it hurts.
The cot scene though in the hotel with him.
Yes,
that is one of the best moments of this movie, because it feels like you walked into another film. Like, there's a moment earlier where they start showing
I was waiting for Don Knotts to show up.
Right. Well, there's a point earlier in the film where they start showing clips from the Hammer version of Frankenstein, where they're watching it together at the drive-in. And I even made the joke as I was watching. It's like, we now bring you Curse of Frankenstein, already in progress. But like the scene with the cot feels like you sat on. If I had not seen James Mason standing there, I would have thought I sat on the remote, and it like changed to another channel where he was like, doing hotel hilarity with freaking Scatman.
Yeah, I was waiting for Don Knotts to walk in. Like, oh, what are you doing, Jack Tripper? Like, you can't sleep with a 14-year-old girl.
I, James Mason, am trying to open up this cot because my stepdaughter would not allow me to sleep in the same bed, even though I would very much like to bang her. I would at this time.
I mean, honestly, it's legitimately the most entertaining 10 minutes of that movie.
But yeah, no, it's with and I had said this before, with context, without context, again, if you were just like, if you're making dinner for everybody and Lolita's on, they're like, we're gonna turn on a movie. I'm like, cool, whatever. You would think this is like a melodrama, like, fucking The Way We Were or some shit, where it's like, they're trying to deal with the mother committed suicide, and he was the older, stepfather who very much loved the mother, and he cares for the daughter, but he's like, they're not blood and they haven't known each other that long, so they're trying to build a relationship. If you don't have the context of what this movie's about, it kind of loses that. But at the same time, again, as a rape victim, I don't want to see her getting raped. And that's why I was like bracing myself. It's like, James Mason, don't make me hate you, dude. I love you too much. You're the voice of God in every Eddie Izzard special. I can't lose that, special to me. Wrapping up though, we talked, Sean talked about this a bit ago. Stanley Kubrick taking stories and making them his own, which can be a freaking spin the bottle between, oh, that was okay, nice, and what the fuck? And this leans more towards, okay, you're fine. You've got most of it. And again, I give him a pass on this one because, again, 1962, the censors are looking at that going, no, not a fucking chance in hell, my dude. But again, overall, like, again, I probably would. I don't know if I'd watch the movie again. I mean, I might. You know, as always, again, I love James Mason partially because I just like imitating. It was like, I am Captain Nemo, and surely we can find a place to. It was like the minute she said, "Where are we gonna live?" after finds out her mom's dead, I was expecting to be like, "Well, I was Captain Nemo, and I'm sure this would allow us a place 20,000 leagues under the sea. They would, yes." Or perhaps we live at Salem's Lot. No, that doesn't happen for another 30 years. I do apologize.
I swear to God, when he is like, Lolita, why don't you love me anymore? And he's like, you talk like that. Jesus Christ, talk like a human. All right.
Lolita 2024, starring Ben Stein.
All right, Sean, tell me your thoughts on the movie. And there's one other thing I want to address. So we'll have one more go around, and then we're moving on to Eyes Wide Shut.
Okay, sure. I'll try to keep this as succinct as I'm able. First off, on a superficial note, if I am given the offer by a studio today that I have carte blanche, they want me to direct another adaptation of Lolita, I only have one concrete deal-breaking demand. Either we get Jennifer Coolidge or you get someone else to direct.
Okay.
I'll second
Having
that.
said that, the way this movie executes its story, I feel like it's an extended metaphor for Shawn Michaels and Scott Hall having to get together in a New York hotel room the night before their SummerSlam 93 or 94, 93, something like that rematch, and having to figure out, okay, the Athletic Commission has said we can't use the chair as a weapon this time. We got to figure some shit out. I feel like there was a lot that Kubrick wanted to say, but they knew there was no way in hell Hollywood as a whole was going to allow him to say it and escape with his career intact. And something that Dorian said actually got me rethinking something that I was going to say. And that was the part where he said this was one of the flattest movies he had ever seen. And prior to that, I was thinking about making a case of, gee, I would love to see how Lolita would be executed with a tone that's more along the lines of something like Alicia Silverstone's Crush, or Wild Thing, or Poison Ivy, or Knock Knock. Movies like that are much more
Basic
on
Instinct.
the nose. Yeah, okay, I would go with Basic Instinct. Yeah, I would give you that one.
Sorry, go ahead.
But especially the other ones, because there's a lot of the themes of, the taboo sexuality of young women and the dangers of that temptation. And I have this weird thing where sometimes someone will come up with something about a movie they patently dislike, and I find a reason why I genuinely, without any mental gymnastics, objectively like it. I have done this with the ending of Mass Effect 3. I did this with the end. I did this with the entirety of Halloween Ends. And now I find myself doing this with Lolita, because even if this was not an ideal set of circumstances, even if Stanley Kubrick couldn't use every tool in his belt that he maybe wanted to, even if I was both baffled and disappointed by how little tension there was to really sink my eyes into where it felt like it should have been, in a way, it feels almost like the movie falls ass backwards into that flatness, kind of serving a theme of the idea that the seedy underbelly of America, of suburban sexuality, doesn't always stink to high heaven. Sometimes it's pretty well perfumed. There's not even anything really in the soundtrack, in the score, that really lends an impression of anything tawdry. And maybe that was, I'm no one to assume, and I'm probably really overreaching by doing this. But I want to think that maybe that might have occurred to Kubrick at some point, that by keeping everything so flat and understated, we're saying something about how softly and quietly something like this can be just persistently
I think it's a
swept
brilliant
under the rug to the point where absolutely nobody sees anything amiss.
Yeah, I
I
think
would
it's a
actually
brilliant
agree with you
point.
on
Hang
that.
on, Norian. I think it's a brilliant point because you're talking about statistically the amount of people that get, the amount of underage people that get assaulted by a family member, and how much that doesn't get talked about. How many incidences of rape and molestation go unreported? How there is a degree of the society, like the whole Me, and I don't want to go off on a tangent here, so I'm going to say this as quickly as I can. But the whole Me Too thing was not just about women saying like, hey, there's a problem here. It was also, we can't talk about this. If you say X, you're this. If you say Y, you're that. There's no winning. And this is again why I was one of those people staring up and cheering during America Ferrera's thing in Barbie. It sucks to be a woman. You have no good choices. Like, yep, we get it. And so like the idea that in the dark underbelly of just average middle class suburban society is all this bad shit that's going on. We talked about that with American Beauty, Sean, that the beneath the surface of this pristine suburban community lies, all of this badness.
Or to another extent, Far From Heaven, which I mean, tonally, and visually, it doesn't necessarily feel all that unlike this movie.
And so he may have purposely been going for that level of contrast, that American Beauty, Far From Heaven kind of a thing. All right, go ahead and wrap up your point, and then we'll do the last bit here.
Well, I was going to say, I quick that I agreed with Sean. There was one shot actually that almost proves him to a T, and it's only a very short shot. It's a walking shot from the side of James Mason coming into he's dragging Lolita after the play into the living room so they can talk. And in the background of this very pristine, nice looking, townhouse 2-floor thing, there's like shirt or so hung over the, that's been just like draped over the banister, and things are just slightly amiss. Like they're not dirty like a house full of like young kids would be. It's like, this is 2 people. You'd think you'd pick this up. But again, it's framed in that moment so brilliantly. It's the only moment that was like really wasn't that flat, was like, see, something is wrong here. It's not wrong enough that it would set off a flare and send in the cops, but it's like something's not right, which I think was a brilliant thing. So I wanted to agree with Sean. I said it was so flat, but I also wanted to like kind of take that, not take it back, but go to your point, All
right, I'm gonna say.
Yeah, I mean, for Kubrick, it's rare restraint. Mm-hmm. But in this, I mean, you talked about him having to kind of rein in a 3-ring circus of a movie. I found that kind of ironic, because this is a rare level of understatement that he rarely ever showed. But man, even under imperfect circumstances, hats off, because it served him and it served the story really, really well in this.
I would like to know if he were still with us, or if somewhere out there he's actually spoken to this in some literature, what Kubrick's thoughts were. This is not an invitation to discuss it now. I have to make a statement to get to a point. I would be very interested in Kubrick's thoughts on monogamy versus non-monogamy, because I swear to God, there's things going on in this one and Eyes Wide Shut, which makes me think he wasn't a huge fan.
You hit that segue like a hanging curveball, sir. Kudos.
I want to make this point about Lolita, and then get you guys really quick, like 20 word or less feedback, and then we'll move on to Eyes Wide Shut. And again, just for time, but because it's Lolita, and because it's the story of an old man and a young gal, and and the sin they commit, what's getting lost is how much of this movie is about agency and autonomy and control between a man and a woman. I wish he hadn't been 14, because then he really could have focused on it a little bit more. That the last half of the movie, where they're in whatever town they're in, where he's lecturing and they're posing as father and daughter, and some of it is got to be motivated by, hey, you got to keep it quiet here. People are going to be suspicious of us, you tart. Like, you're going to get me in trouble. But there's a large portion of it that is definitely, he has this, it's beyond infatuation. It's an obsession with her. And I think it's low-hanging fruit to just say it's an obsession with a 14-year-old girl. No, it's an obsession with her in particular. Okay?
All three of these movies are very much about obsession.
Yeah. He has decided that she is the Mind Stone and he must have her. And nobody else can. And he is not willing to share. He is not, it is very
Lolita, Infinity War.
Yeah.
James Mason of Thanos. And I
you'll love to see that.
I will at this time. Sorry. That happened.
It's fine. But I'm bringing this up because this is what, I mean, molesting kids is bad. Like, what is it? That's not a hot take. So it kind of just ignored that part of the movie and was focusing on his desire to control her and her losing the interest he had in him because he's overly obsessive and controlling. And she doing things on purpose, acting out, purposely creating problems to undermine that control. We're like, this is all, look, the problem for her is not that he's a middle-aged man who shouldn't be sleeping with a child. The problem is he's an ass about it from her perspective. And that's the more, weirdly enough, that's the more interesting stuff about this movie for me, is Kubrick's commentary on sex and relationships and power dynamics. And it just gets muddled because we also have to contend with the age difference between these two people. But if she wasn't, it's a much more interesting drama about men and women and their relationships and the power dynamics between them. You want to comment on that, Mick, or any part of it?
I would like to agree. I mean, with all three movies, it definitely shows some, and I mean, it's a little less so with Clockwork Orange, unless you want to comment on the fact that it kind of, with the aspect of women, it's more of just the sex.
Mm-hmm.
There's not really any relationship happening exactly.
Yeah, that one, they're seen as they're objectified, they're objects.
Well, I mean, even if we go beyond that, like talking about The Shining, there's that relationship, and you have I keep hearing this word all the time, demure, almost, wife.
Speaking of slang in today's youth.
Stop bastardizing words.
But also with like Jack reacting to that, you can tell that there's always going to be that power dynamic happening, right, as evidenced by Eyes Wide Shut.
Coming up next.
All right, go ahead, Dorian. You're
just very quickly, yeah.
I threw a lot out there. What's your thoughts?
Overall, yeah, it's the power dynamic again. We have having to deal with her being 14 as opposed to being older, where we could have had like more, somewhat nice or romantic, even though they're twistedly romantic moments where it's like, God, she thinks she's happy with him. Fuck. And then seeing it, fall down the cliff. We obviously can't do that with a 14-year-old actor. Even in the Jeremy Irons one, I was reading that anytime she had to sit on his lap or something like that, there was a pillow between her and him on purpose from Irons, demand as well as the exec. But with this movie, it's like we seem to lose this sense of, I don't know. Sorry, I'm trying to find the right word to say. We lost the sense of what the book's really about, and we lost the horror that is this story, because it is a horror story, And again, yes, I'm taking it personally, and I'm always going to take it personally, and I'm not going to apologize for that. And again, mine was, and I'm not trying to make this a pulpit where I can talk about my rape, but I was manipulated and raped by an older woman. I was made promises, so the parts of the movie where he's trying to control her, I felt that hard. I was like, these parts work. It just felt like in order to get the point across, we needed to go further that we couldn't. But overall, I think my final thoughts on it to the audience out there is, if you're a fan of movies, go see this film. Absolutely, rent it wherever you can find it. It's on Tubi for free right now.
Yeah, that was where I watched it.
Except same here. If you're not a huge movie fan, I'd say you could miss this one, and it's not going to shatter, your world. Like again, Clockwork Orange, I'd say everybody needs to see that at least once. I mean, if it's something that has happened to you, because again, there's rape in that one too. I can understand giving it a miss, but this one's one that is great for movie fans and people who love movies. But if you're a casual movie fan, you can miss this one, and it's not.
Yeah, this is not for casual movie fans.
Of course, if you're a casual movie fan, what the fuck are you doing listening to this podcast? But
Really,
I mean, if you're,
navel
like,
gazing
looking
about
through-
film craft. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mick.
Oh, you're fine. I know. I was just saying, if you're dishing through the $5 Walmart bin and you pull that out, it's gonna be like, eh.
All right, Sean, I brought up a lot of stuff about relationships, narcissist personality disorder, autonomy, control. You want to give me 50 words or less on any of that?
Sure. And it's that I would disagree with Dorian very slightly on something. And that is that I do think this is a movie that as many people as can steel themselves for it should watch, but especially cishet men, because it brings to light what, and you know what, here, I'm going to use the big U for all of you for a second. It is what way too fucking many of you need to start internalizing. And it's because Dorian brought up and I'm sorry, please forgive me if this is a step too far, but what you described as having been taken advantage of as a man, or as a boy at the time, by an older woman, and I should stress that, for boy at the time. That is something that gets thrown around and taken far too lightly in conversation about sexual assault and rape, and that is whenever it's a subject of a young teenage or an adolescent boy who has a sexual experience with an older woman. So, nice. I wish I had teachers like that back when I was in school. I'm sorry, I became Beetlejuice Michael Keaton there for a moment. And the fact is, no, you ignorant, insensitive fuck muppet. It's not nice. It's still being taken advantage of. And these incidents that you're making such light of crystallize the essence of all sex crimes, and that they're not about attraction. They're not about behavior. They're not about words, intoxication, setting, any of the above. They're not about sexual preference. They're not about gender. They're not about what you wanted or how your body involuntarily reacted. It is about power. It is about control. And that is what I think the real genius of Lolita is it gets around so many limitations that Kubrick had foisted upon him. And let's not play dumb about this. We know exactly the fuck why. Enough time has gone by. We know why, and we know that especially in a post-Tracy Lords world, in a post R. Kelly world, in a post-Drake world, in a post-Harvey Weinstein world, where Stanley Kubrick gets to make this movie today, it's an entirely fucking different movie. Because I almost guarantee he's not pulling punches. He's not even coming in with gloves. He's coming in with bare knuckles to say what he said. Granted, he's still going to say it in an artful, poignant way, but he's going to get his point across. It's the kind of place with this kind of material where I feel like he almost was with Eyes Wide Shut. It almost feels like the kind of movie he got to make with Eyes Wide Shut was almost the kind of version of Lolita I wish he had had a chance to make. And I'm sorry, right. I'm going to step down off the soapbox.
He doesn't come in with just bare gloves. He comes in with like those broken bottles that Liam Neeson had in The Gray taped between his knuckles, and it's like shit. So yeah, you know what? I'm going to, just for the sake of the audience that's going to listen to just the audio of this, I'm going to slightly recant because of Mr. Comer's soliloquy there. yes, everyone should watch this movie.
Okay.
And especially that in that case. But also, Mr. Comer, you did not step too far, and I appreciate everything you said. And I hope any other victims have gone through what I did that listen to this. I know they would appreciate it too. So thank you.
Eyes Wide Shut is what you get when George Lucas films his wet dream.
Okay, just from him saying that, I'm now visualizing Mark Hamill in Tom Cruise's role and Carrie Fisher in like fucking Nicole Kidman's role, and I want Peter Mayhew as the costume.
Now hold up. That's work.
George Lucas.
No, the costume owner has to be Jar Jar Binks.
I have said many times for the last 20 years has a touch of the tism and does not know how people act, which is why the Star Wars movies are the dreck that they are. Sorry.
Hey now.
You tell me to hey now. I'll talk to you about the Catholic Church for another hour. You don't control yourself. Anyway.
No, you'll just mute me.
Fair. Eyes Wide Shut is a movie that is definitely somebody who struggles with people, thinks people do when they have sex. It is the weirdest fucking movie I have ever seen. So
I don't know for a fact if he was, but it is quite possibly Exhibit A that Stanley was very likely on the spectrum.
Yeah, him, George Lucas, and Wes Anderson all want to show you their list. Anyway, every time I do that joke, somewhere out there, Robert Redford's like, "Stop making fun of Wes Anderson, you bully."
This movie is Stanley Kubrick going, "Let me sing you the song of my people."
Eyes Wide Shut is a 1999 erotic mystery psychological drama, film directed, produced, and co-written by Stanley Kubrick. It is based on the 1926 novella Dream Story by author Schnitzler, transferring the story setting from early 20th century Vienna to 1990s New York City. The plot centers on a physician who is played by Tom Cruise, who is shocked, I tell you, when his wife, Nicole Kidman, reveals that she had contemplated,
Had a
not
dream.
actually did,
How dare.
Had a dream.
Yeah.
Mark, why do I get the feeling you and I in particular are going to have opinions about this?
Having an affair 12 months earlier, he then embarks on a night-long adventure they call it, during which he inflicts a mass orgy of unnamed secret societies. Now, look, I don't want to
time for love, Dr. Jones.
Indiana Jones in the sex orgy.
Listen,
Junior.
I don't want to get into my own personal stuff here, especially because we have a new person, and I'd like to refer to be on more podcasts before I scare her off.
You see her slowly slink off camera, just like.
I'm not easily scared off. Trust
Fair
me.
enough.
One of her favorite movies is okay. I'm going to say this just about her, just so you kind of get an idea. Because we have a lot of time to talk to each other and like get to know each other. One of her favorite movies is House of a Thousand Corpses. Go.
As a card-carrying member of the poly kink fetish community, I watched this movie, and I've been to an orgy or two in my life, and again,
like you do.
I have been to swinger party houses. I have been naked swimming. I love naked swimming. I have seen a thing. I have been to a thing, and did George Lucas have a conversation with real men, and they were telling him their experiences of cocaine-riddled orgies, and he went, "I want to make that movie," and instead, it's like, but with Darth Vader. I don't. How did you interpret, like? How did you? I know it was Kubrick, not George Lucas, but they might as well for this movie be the same goddamn guy. How did we get from sexy orgy to what we got in this ridiculous piece of shit? Anyway, all of that to say, this thing was made on a budget of $65 million. It was mostly profitable. It came in at $162.1 million. I don't know if this has any. Yeah, it doesn't seem to have had any awards or anything like that.
Actually, God, I had to say actually. Fuck me, I'm sorry.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah, actually has entered the chat. In recent years, I don't personally understand it, and I don't agree with it. It's one of those movies that's undergone a real re-examination
Mm-hmm.
where it went from being disastrously panned and a joke butt when it came out to now I've seen lists that hail it as one of the top 10, in some cases, top 5 best movies of the 90s.
That line from earlier, Shay said it during one of our other podcasts. It got repeated here tonight. This was amazing. This was wonderful. I'm glad to be a part of it. And I never want to see this movie again, or whatever the line is.
The Shay Doctrine, yeah.
Yeah. This is beautiful and important, and I don't ever want to see it again. It's kind of how I feel about Eyes Wide Shut. I'll tell you how this movie goes in just a second, but there are elements of the physical movie craft that are superior. There are reasons I think this should be lauded as this is what a movie looks like. My problem is the superior film craft doesn't match the theme of what it was going for. So let me get into this real quick. So Nicole Kidman and Tom Cruise are a married couple, and over the course of an interminable run length of this movie, she ends up telling Tom Cruise that she had a dream when they went on, I think it was a vacation, about having sex with a Navy officer. And Tom Cruise can't handle it. Just can't. The very idea that another person that he's married to might have sexual feelings that she did not act on with another person even.
You had a wet dream, you bitch!
Yes, like you... If I ever hear the virtue, I can't talk about it because I've been sworn to secrecy. But I know somebody who has used the phrase "emotionally cheated" once or twice, and every time it's like if I ever hear the words "emotionally cheated," I'm gonna punch someone in the throat. So he can't fucking handle it, and it drives him to maybe kind of sort of contemplate maybe thinking about sleeping with a hooker.
And
he's
just for the audience's sake, it's not that he can't deal with it. The entire runtime of this 2 hour and almost 45-minute movie, he is constantly, every time he's sitting down and kind of being just like, he's flashing back to a visual image he's had in his head of Nicole Kidman getting fucked by this naval officer throughout the entire goddamn movie.
That didn't actually happen.
It's fucking take a... I'm sorry. I'm going to save it for my stuff. I'm sorry. Yeah. Go ahead, Mark.
So anyway, there's a piano player that he knows, and the piano player is like, hey, I have this gig I'm not supposed to tell you about. And he's like, tell me more. So yes, it's 9 hours into this movie, he finally makes it to this Eyes Wide Shut party. And it's people wearing robes, and the women are it's like a Story of O kind of thing. If you don't know what the Story of O is, also movie adapted from a French book. It's about BDSM. It's a whole thing. But the women they're walking around, with the boobs akimbo. Same thing with the women in this one. The guys are all wearing cloaks and masks. The women are wearing masks and no clothes. And as Tom Cruise walks around, he's not supposed to be there, but Tom Cruise is walking around this party, this sex party. And there's kind of sort of shots of some sex happening here or there. But for the most part, he's walked into a horror movie where, the final girl keeps telling him, get out of here before it's too late, Tom Cruise. You don't understand. You've walked into there's people fucking. That's what they're doing, okay? They're not even doing wax play and accidentally burning themselves. There's
no planes for you to fall out of. There's no motorcycles to flip.
You're in danger, Tom Cruise. And he's just walking around and people are banging. I'm like, isn't even going to get hit with a whip? Nothing? My God. No one's roped and suspended from the ceiling or anything. But sure, he's in danger.
May we also point out that Tom Cruise never runs in this movie?
He's not running away from his gay. He's not running away from his gay thoughts in this one. That is my son's favorite Tom Cruise joke. My 10-year-old genius son. I talk about him a lot, Mick. You just got to go with it. But yes, the future leader of the free world, my genius son Jonas. His favorite Tom Cruise joke is every movie he's running away from his gay thoughts.
That's fantastic.
No, I don't want to be fudge packed.
Anywho, so eventually the jig is up, and they're just like, look, you take your clothes off so that we can all do terrible things to you. And one of them is like, no, I'll sacrifice myself for Tom Cruise. And I'm like, all right, get the fuck out of here. So he goes home,
Standards,
And-
bitch. Do you speak them?
And now it's like, what the hell was I a part of last night? And now he's like, I want to know what this was. I want to know what we're doing here. What's with all the fucking? And he keeps getting like letters and stuff. It says, no, Tom Cruise, go away. Stop asking questions, you dick. And he goes home and they put his mask in the bed next to his wife. At which point he has the lamest mental breakdown I've ever seen. And says, I'll tell you everything. All right.
Which I really wanted Nicole Kidman. Like, I wanted to see a fucking gag reel part where he's like, because he's like crying. It's like, I'll tell you everything. I didn't ask, but I couldn't.
Well, what if you just went to bed? Anywho,
You woke me up,
I
man.
told you can't keep drinking Budweisers at 1 a.m. You come in a bawling mess.
so in what
He
passes
did
for
far and away.
So in what passes for the conclusion of this picture, they go Christmas shopping with their daughter, this poor innocent child, and he's like, well, what do we do now, Nicole Kidman? And she says, well, we should probably fuck Finn. That's the movie, everybody. This is
he's not fucking with you. It cuts to black.
yeah, and we're done here. That's what this movie. This movie is 12 hours long. Okay, it's like it's only beat by the director's cut of Lord of the Rings. I mean, all 3 movies.
When Lawrence of Arabia is looking at you, going, "Dude, you done fucked up,"
and it takes about 45 minutes to an hour for us to get to the orgy. And when we're there, it's kind of, again, I said that Kubrick kind of shoots things like he's on safari. That's kind of what this looks like. And we're doing that thing in Austin Powers where, the naughty bits are being covered by like melons and, the different objects. So he's shooting around.
Here we are on sex safari. Here, two people in their natural habitat as
We're
they may.
shooting this stupid thing, and you can't. It's heavily implied. You see gyrating bodies, but you don't really see anything because everything's being blocked because you don't want an X rating on this stupid picture. The sequence in and of itself takes about 2 minutes of this 18-hour movie. And then it's over, and then the rest of it is him trying to figure out where he was last night and why he was there. And then my favorite part of this movie is him being chastised by the doctor who damn near killed a broad at the beginning of the movie, telling him, you made me seem like an asshole in front of these people, and I swear to God, I saw myself in that scene. Like, I can't trust you. You're a moron. Like, oh, my God.
Fool of a toque. Throw yourself in next time and risk your stupidity. And what's doubly funny about that is Tom Cruise could play a hobbit without having to use forced perspective. Good night, everyone.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Dad.
Mick.
Yes.
Tom Cruise was an actor once. I don't know what the fuck he's doing in this movie. I don't know why the direction to him was, okay, say the line again, but pretend you're a robot.
A robot that's got like gum in his fucking gears or some shit.
Dialogue.
At this point, we just feel whole reincarnation cycles removed from Interview with the Vampire and Born on the 4th of July.
Tom Cruise has charisma. He was apparently told leave it at the door when he got on set.
Good morning, Mr. Cruise.
Yes and no.
Charisma real quick. Thank you very much. Have a lovely day, sir.
Yes and no.
I swear to God, if I didn't know any better, I would assume that wasn't real. That was deep fake artificial intelligence Tom Cruise in this thing. I like Nicole Kidman. She's as good as she was in Moulin Rouge, and you and I talked forever about how great Nicole Kidman is in that. The more I watch Nicole Kidman's work, the more I realize she's an underrated, stellar actress.
She didn't have a lot to do in this movie. Is one of my biggest complaints on that front.
She gets to deliver that monologue. That's what she gets to do. That's her whole reason for being in this movie.
And again, she like just stood up from the couch and been like, "Good night, everybody," and walked out.
She has 2 jobs in Eyes Wide Shut: look awesome naked, goal achieved.
Yeah.
And second thing, deliver this monologue, and her monologue is the best thing about this movie.
Oh yeah,
it should have ended at that point. Like, and we're done here. So I'm going to throw it over to you. I've just got
to really check that monologue out in like its script form. As an actor, I think it'd be really good. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, it's fine. I could talk about like set design, architecture, a lot of that. Like I said, a lot of the physical craft production stuff is really, really superior in this movie. My problems with it are, like I said, Tom Cruise's line readings, especially at the origin scene, seem otherworldly, but like in a dumb way. And when you deconstruct this movie and you break it down to brass tacks and you realize this is about Tom Cruise not being able to handle his wife having the hots for a guy in the past tense, I'm like, I don't understand the point of this fucking movie other than Stanley Kubrick wanted 3 hours to tell you how much he hates monogamy. Your witness, madam.
Yeah, just good night, everybody.
That's all you need. That's
Yeah,
all you need.
Mike dropped.
So I think I kind of dug into a little deeper than what the movie was actually portraying, because at one point I had to confirm. I was like, is this movie just him having existential crisis about literally what we were talking about? But I also think it's a conversation on sexuality from men versus females, and how some men will not realize what goes on in her head the entire time. Not even just like during sex in general, but just every day. I could be grocery shopping. That's all that is. And then I got really excited when Hotch came on from Criminal Minds. I forgot what the actor's name is, but that was a highlight. And otherwise, I just feel like if they took that scene inside of the secret cult, made it into a porn, and like actually was able to film it, beautiful.
Did you say you wanted Guar to like do the music behind him?
Yeah.
I would have also accepted that.
Yes, absolutely. No, it would be fantastic. If they did the soundtrack for the whole movie, it would be even better. But no, I just feel like there was so much that they could have done if you were gonna push it, because otherwise it's just kind of lost. The plot is lost.
Okay, if you want to, let's have this conversation, me and you, Mick. Just me and
Yeah.
you, okay? Let's push these fucking other dudes away. These crazy men. Let's just
Other
me and
way.
you talk for a second. Yeah. If you would like to have a meditation on the relationship between a husband and a wife and the value of monogamy versus ethical non-monogamy, that's a movie I'm interested in. I was actually listening to myself and Robert Winfrey review the movie Deep Water with Ben Affleck and Ana de Armas a couple of years ago, and I had actually just started experimenting with like polyamory at the time, so I definitely had some takes on that, and that movie absolutely deals with the value of ethical non-monogamy versus monogamy and like a mono-poly relationship between the two of them. It's not a good movie, by the way, but at least it was trying to talk about that in a not so stupid way. So if you want to make that movie, make that movie. My problem here with Eyes Wide Shut is Kubrick seems to be saying, like, let's think outside the box in terms of monogamous relationships. And his way of doing that is to torture Tom Cruise for 3 hours.
Basically.
And I'm like, okay, that seems muddied to me. Like, it was almost like he had an idea of what it was he wanted to say, and someone told him, well, you can't say that. We went through this with Lolita, Stanley. You can't keep doing this.
You have to stop at some point, man.
Right. Like he was really edited down from what he was trying to go for, and at which point the plot got lost.
Right. And what, like, something Dorian brought up that is a real point of the movie is the whole time he's having this fantasy of his wife, fucking the sailor guy. And he's making this whole thing up.
That, like this, she's fucking Popeye. Well, blow me down. I wish you would.
Ahoy, sailor.
So she's fucking Popeye.
Shut up.
He's
Popeye.
strong to the finish because he eats his spinach.
Thank you. We've now ruined Eyes Wide Shut for everybody.
And Popeye.
It just seems so. And I won't. It doesn't seem random because it does, but it doesn't. But it just, get over it, dude.
Yeah. Oh my God. This idea that if you should claim a woman and provide her a house and and a lifestyle, that she also forever give up being a person. And we talked about this with X. A person is not just defined by they are also defined by their sexual needs and desires, which don't go away. you kind of have them for the duration of your life, even when you're 1,000 years old, as the characters.
Well, I mean, but Mark, that's because, and you and I are both probably plenty familiar with this. The fact is, behind every kink, no matter how taboo, no matter how seemingly fringe, there is an actual human emotional connection and need
Right.
that is inextricable from that. And you could name practically any kink you could think of. And if somebody were to really get honest about it, they would be able to probably tell you something that's profoundly insightful about themselves.
Let me throw this out there really. Hang on. Yeah, no. I want you to go, but I got to get this one point out there because it's getting lost. There's nothing inherently wrong or not valuable about traditional monogamy.
No.
But that's also a choice between two people. And just because you're monogamous doesn't mean you don't have feelings and emotions and needs and wants that another person can provide for you. You're just not acting on them. These are all perfectly valid things. And my struggle with this movie, other than it's boring as shit, is that Stanley Kubrick's coming at this from a point of view of, no, monogamy means you become a robot and you have no desires outside of the person you're monogamous with, and that's the end of you, and you just stop being a person. And I'm like, well, that's a really weird take. Go ahead, Nick.
Well, I was just saying there's a psychological response to any different kink that you would have, and that goes on to like really reading people, because even if it's the weirdest thing you've ever heard, there is a mental reason why.
Right.
There's
why that's happening. But also that made me think about when the movie was first starting and they're at that dance, the Christmas party, I assume, the ball, they were going off she was dancing with that dude and he was going off with those two girls. I was rooting for them almost, because I was just like, oh, they're secure.
Oh, look at
and
you.
then that got way downhill.
Yeah.
Like, did I not tell you when we started this is a Stanley Kubrick movie? Nobody is happy.
All right. Why don't you take over from there, Dorian? We've thrown a lot out here. Your thoughts on the movie, the themes that it's poorly delving into, all of that.
Well, again, very quickly, just bouncing off what you guys were just, very much hitting on is like the whole monogamy is looked as like you become a robot and just everything shuts down and you die sad and alone. I'm adopted, but one of the person I call my adopted mom, who was not actually the person who adopted me, I call her my legal guardian, but she refers to herself as monogamously slutty, and we get a huge kick out of that every time she makes a joke about it. So again, it's like, monogamy is not, the end of the road if you choose that, but again, there's nothing wrong with polyamory and so forth, as long as it's done with consent and everyone's being taken care of.
Yeah. However, on the word ethical.
Yeah. Ethical. With this movie, and I'm gonna do a big swing here again as the filmmaker on this show. I think that this would be fixed. I'm sorry. What'd you say?
Big swing.
Big swing.
Sorry.
Giggity. But no, I think this movie with a slight script revision, Stanley Kubrick still is producer. I can put a director in the chair who, with his personal vision, how he's always approached his films, could make this movie something that everyone would want to watch. And here it is, ladies and gentlemen, Eyes Wide Shut, as directed by David Lynch.
Oh my God.
Make it a psychological deep dive into this guy's psyche, everything that scares him. If you still want to keep
who was the one who did Sex, Lies, and Videotape? That was Steven Soderbergh, right?
Yes.
Okay, who did 9.5 Weeks?
Oh crap.
Because those would be my first two choices.
Dorian, keep going. I'm going to answer his question.
Okay, the reason that I say Lynch is because this movie has a lot of, again, there's every frame of painting, fine. Again, that's always been Kubrick's thing. Lynch could have deep dived into this and, really taken us on a psychological journey. And I'm not talking about weird, kind of Eraserhead necessarily imagery, but some of that could have been in there of again, even if you have Tom Cruise, I'm confident. And if Nicole Kidman leaves me, I'm, 90s Tom Cruise. Any woman, they're going to be a line.
Hey, real
But
quick. So the director was Adrian Lin, who, funny enough, also directed Deep Water, which I was just referencing.
Oh, bitchin'. Lynch could have taken us down that road where it's like, the facade is, yes, I'm 90s Tom Cruise. Women fall at my feet, but I'm in love with Nicole Kidman. Oh, she wants to fuck Popeye? Fuck off. I got bitches for days. I'm
somewhere out there's a guy watching this going, I'm in the Navy. It's like, we're not all Popeye, you sons of bitches.
All of you sliding into me DMs.
My phone is like, you have 25 missed calls from one of your clients who is a retired naval officer. Right? Listen here, you little son of a bitch. I don't care if you are 26. I'm still going to kick your ass.
My ex is like, excuse me.
Excuse your ass? No.
Navy guys all crying in the corner. This fucking podcast.
I think that's one of the issues that this movie suffers from is that I don't think Kubrick was very, very old and sick when he was making this. In fact, behind the scenes thing, he died of a heart attack literally a week after he had given it to the final cut to Warner Brothers. So he never even got to see the premiere. This is the final film of Stanley Kubrick. And it's, you okay? Sorry, Sean.
Yeah, just cracking my jaw.
Oh, sorry. You look like you're
cracking, just cracking my jaw.
All right, no worries. But yeah, so it's, again, I think Lynch could have done better. One of the things that we were talking about when we watched this is that I think Tom Cruise was kind of ill cast for this. And the name we picked, even though he would have been a little too young at the time, was Adrian Brody as the main character. Would have been, I think, perfect for this. Or someone who would, someone in that type. You have this fantastic.
Who would have been better for this, and I don't know if the timing would have worked out, but Mark Wahlberg. Because I want, here's my pitch for Mark Wahlberg. If you're going to be this confused, but also this full of testosterone, that's kind of Mark Wahlberg's calling card.
Or Luke Wilson.
Yeah. You had a sexual fantasy about another guy with the win? What? No.
I'm going to go work out.
And see, the reason I'm saying Brody is because, and this is the reason I think Sean and I are agreeing that like it shouldn't be Wahlberg, is that you need the fantastically just gorgeous, Nicole Kidman. Whether it's the 90s, whether it's 2 years ago, she's still magnificently gorgeous. I had a huge crush on her, in every movie I saw her in, And to quote Family Guy, and I'm sorry, Nicole Kidman, if we ever work together and you ever see this thing, it's the Stewie line when I watched this movie way too young as well. I think I was like 8 when I saw Eyes Wide Shut. And because we had the VHS, we had the DVD and the VHS, strangely enough. But I was like, watching Nicole Kidman she's getting, the scenes in Tom Cruise's head where he's visualizing what she was talking about. It's like when she got naked, it's like, oh, my wee-wee seems to have been struck by rigor mortis. But
hang on.
I got 2 My Little Pony shout outs in 1 review, bitches.
You're about to get this one.
That, ladies and gentlemen, is Mark's sign to move the fuck on or land the plane.
Hang on.
Get on with it. Yes, get on with it.
Oh, Mick, I have so many buttons.
But
no,
no,
I love it.
It's the situation of like, I feel like poor Sean. This movie this was not one Kubrick should have done. And I will use another one of like Kubrick really wanted to do the movie AI, artificial intelligence, that Steven Spielberg would end up doing.
Yeah, that's right, he did.
It was his idea. It was like his post-futuristic Pinocchio style thing. And a lot of people say that that's one of Steven Spielberg's weakest films because it's like Kubrick should have been at the helm for that one. And I agree with them on that. Eyes Wide Shut is one of those films that he should have produced. He should have kind of led the path. But again, someone like Lynch or Soderbergh could have taken us down this psychological path that doesn't make it so goddamn boring. It's like, let's pull this person apart. Let's pull Tom Cruise's character, the character built apart psychologically, and go through all of his fears and shit like that.
I'll tell you what this movie's missing. The orgy, instead of like,
I'll tell you what this movie's missing, and you start with the orgy. This is
we needed more. This movie needed more sex. That's gonna be right on my tombstone. In all seriousness, and then I'm pitching it to Sean, who's been waiting patiently.
Yeah.
what this movie, if the whole point of him going to the orgy was this is supposed to just shatter his brain and make him go back running to his wife, going, "I'm sorry, I should have been more sympathetic to you wanting to sleep with another dude." There needed to be more. The problem was it was too safe. It was what's the word I'm looking for? It starts with an S. There was sanitized. That can't believe I'm about to say this. I'm going to throw it on a T-shirt. Most sanitized orgy I've ever seen, captured on film or in real life. People watching this podcast.
Jay said something very similar in the comments.
What does he do with himself all this time? Anyway, there needed to be shit happening that, like, Tom Cruise needed to have been invited in, and then he sees this world, and like, look, who hasn't been to a sex party or an orgy where you're going, oh, this is a bit much, like, oi, like, whoo, like, that's a real thing, and it is the kind of thing that might force you to go back home to your wife and be like, I like what we have here, it's fine, I can accept a lot of things now, I'm good, I'm a changed man. There was nothing about that experience that changed him. What changed him was the threat that they're going to tell on him to his wife if he doesn't shut his fucking mouth.
Yeah, he needed a snagglepuss moment where he sees the orgy, he's like, exit, stay to the left.
Yeah, have his foot destroyed. Did he put that where? And then then Tom Cruises through the door. All right,
running, which would have gotten us to running.
Yeah, one of those. Sean, you can't.
Okay, let me begin. Ironically enough, I had to relocate to the pool because a ping pong game had broken out behind me back in the lounge.
Nice.
So, okay.
You joined your little Lord of the Rings style journey across the street. Real time.
So, let me begin my, as succinct as I can make it, unpacking of my thoughts of Eyes Wide Shut. First of all, obviously, Tom Cruise, Nicole Kidman, both of them absolutely generational, charismatic, magnetic performers. And I can't, having seen Tom Cruise in Interview with the Vampire, say that the man is incapable of simmering, tumultuous, conflicted sexuality because, well, I know better. But in this case, dear God, never in a supposed erotic thriller, we'll get to that, have I ever seen a movie built around such sexless, passionless chemistry. I feel almost like this is an asexual interpretation of ethical non-monogamy.
Can I break in really quick on just something you're saying, because I don't want it to drag us on too long. Just very quickly, with what you're saying, I have to absolutely agree. Because, and again, this comes down to a casting thing. Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman are at the oldest in their very early 30s, and I understand they have a kid and they're trying to show this thing off, but they don't look like they have any passion in their marriage. Like, he comes into the bathroom, she's sitting on the toilet taking a pee, and I'm like, okay, that's something that couples in their late 30s and 40s would do without any passion or something.
That go out bowling with Anakin and Padme.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, continuing onward. And I mean, look, that is not a knock on them. It happens, okay? I love Chris Cornell. I loved Rage Against the Machine. Audio Slave was neither Rage Against the Machine nor Soundgarden. It just didn't work. It just happens that way. It's like trying to explain why most of the matches between Edge and Christian suck. Just sometimes it just ain't there quite like you expect it to be.
One sec, Mick. Do you watch wrestling at all? Have you watched any wrestling in the last 20 years?
No.
Good. Every one of these references lost on you completely. Awesome.
Absolutely. I'm just gonna smile and nod.
So the guy who made a total nonstop action and Scott Steiner comparison a few minutes ago. Moving on.
Fine. I run the network. I do whatever the fuck I want.
I got on the band.
She heard me say TNA and
I
assumed
listen to all those.
I was going to say she heard me say TNA and assumed I meant tits and ass. She's fine. Keep going.
Working as Vince Russo intended. Moving on. Dorian, Alexis can absolutely confirm for you. I am right there with you on the prime Nicole Kidman boner, man. No arguments there whatsoever. I do not dissent that one bit. As far as my actual take on the movie, I had to kind of go back and forth on a couple of things because initially, for those who are new to the show, and for those friends who have kept in touch with me on Instagram and Facebook and maybe haven't quite read between the lines enough, yes, I'm also in an ethically non-monogamous relationship. At first, I thought, God, this is the 50 Shades of Grey of ethical non-monogamy, of swinging, of the lifestyle. But then I also had to remind myself that Stanley wasn't, at the end of the day, really trying to necessarily say anything original about it. He was adapting Dream Story. He was adapting someone else's thoughts on sexuality and monogamy, which, hey, I'm right there with Mark too. I've just to kind of illustrate the polar opposites. I was in a 10-year monogamous relationship with Alexis. I'm now in an ethically non-monogamous relationship with Anne, my beautiful wife. That doesn't mean that I necessarily rejected monogamy entirely. It means that in the dynamic of this relationship, it works for us on so many levels that I'm not going to unpack and undress here.
Stay tuned for the this podcast.
It's when it comes to talking about monogamous versus swingers and people in the lifestyle and polyamorous couples and whatnot, it's a bit like people with tattoos. You people without the tattoos give a whole lot more of a shit about the fact that I have them than I give about the fact that you don't. The fucks to give are very one-sided here. But having said all that, this is an absolutely beautifully shot movie, which for Stanley is absolutely par for the course. It's just that I had to remind myself that I'm sitting here thinking, man, all of the dynamics and self-discovery mingled with anxiety and liberation, and sometimes more than a small amount of healing that takes place in the lifestyle. And this was the kind of story you decided to tell, really? But again, that was where I had to remind myself that wasn't necessarily his original thoughts of it. It was
run this back, but have Ty West direct it, and then I think you got something.
Exactly. I would have loved to have seen Ty West make. Blasphemous as this is going to be to many a film nerd, I would love to see Ty West maybe take a stab at a remake of this, because I think he could positively work wonders.
Yeah, I would like to see a man that actually has and understands sex try a sex movie as opposed to two robots.
I mean, we're remaking everything else, so why not? Like, you could probably get away with it at this point. It's like, I'm going to remake Why the fuck not? Have fun, buddy.
But the fact is, when I talked earlier, and I kind of alluded to how I feel like everybody kind of failed Stanley with this one, I feel like Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman were the wrong people to cast in the lead. He meant well, and I'm sure it worked in theory on paper, but in practice, absolute lead balloon. And then the studio failed him by taking this and really leaning hard into marketing it as an erotic thriller, which, no, it is absolutely the fuck not. That was why I asked about Sex, Lies, and Videotape. 9.5 weeks. Any number of other movies.
Again, the 90s were such a fucking farm field of erotic.
Yeah, let's fucking throw Disclosure in there while we're at it.
I was talking about Basic Instinct earlier, and
Basic Instinct. All these other great movies by people who really understood erotic tension and how to really bring that onto the screen. And it's just a bunch of people for whom, with all due respect to their objective, undeniable generational talents, that just wasn't who they were. It would be like casting John Wayne in Hamlet. That's a choice. That's a choice you could make, but is it a choice you should make? Not when you have so many other ways you can go.
Alas, poor Uric, that son of a bitch.
All right, we are
But just
almost at
it's
an hour past the 19-minute mark.
Then I'll just flat out say it's, as swan songs go, it will illustrate everything that there is to love about absolute vintage Stanley Kubrick visually. But as far as story goes, all due respect to the source material, which I'm sure was great.
Oh, it's fantastic.
I'm sure the story is fantastic, but as far as executing the story of this movie and keeping it interesting and keeping that tension, it's about as limp as Lolita.
Okay. Couple of things I want to do to close out our discussion of Stanley Kubrick, and then we're going to do plugs. His filmography is as follows. He did Fear and Desire in 1952, Killer's Kiss in 55, The Killing in 56. He wrote, directed, and produced Best Boy, Gaff, Catered, Paths of Glory. Then he did Spartacus, because I'm Spartacus. Then we did the aforementioned Lolita, then Doctor Strangelove, then 2001 A Space Odyssey. And that brings us to the 70s with A Clockwork Orange, Barry Lyndon. In the 80s, he did The Shining and Full Metal Jacket. And then he did Eyes Wide Shut in 1999. He was nominated for a bunch of awards for Doctor Strangelove, 2001, A Clockwork Orange, Barry Lyndon, and Full Metal Jacket. He won, however, Best Special Visual Effects for 2001, A Space Odyssey. We talk about Kubrick because we don't have modern film without him. I when I initially prepped with everyone here tonight, and I didn't take into account that every time we add somebody, it makes the podcast exponentially longer because more people have to talk, which I'm happy for. And I'm glad Mick was able to join us tonight. But next time I have to go, be prepared for a 5-hour podcast because that's how long it's going to take.
We're going to talk forever.
Yeah.
But the audience is entertained. So, I mean,
pack a sack lunch, everyone.
Shay in the comments was having a good time.
Yes, she was. But we any one of these movies could have been its own 2-hour podcast. We tried to pack 3 of them into 90 minutes. So, but I'm very glad we did this, and I'm very glad that Mick was able to join us. Did you have fun? Your first podcast? It was 8 hours long. What'd you think?
I did. I was very happy to be here. I was a little nervous before I got on, but I think I got my bearings, and I'm excited to be in more.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, I don't start beating the shit out of you for at least a year into this. And only
I think you two are both already 2 of my favorite people, other than Mark, that I've done podcasts with over this many years.
What were you starting to say there, Mick?
You remember I commented one time, and we're gonna do a Slipknot review.
Oh, that's right. Fantastic. All right. So with that said, that is our review, our triple feature on Stanley Kubrick's Clockwork Orange, Lolita, and Eyes Wide Shut. On Monday, what did I do Monday? Who was with me Monday? Where are my pants? Monday was The Crow. Oh, yeah, that was Dorian and Mac and Robert, and we talked about the new Crow movie.
No, that was Shay, because I was working.
That's right, Shay. That's right. Shay was all done up with the makeup and everything. Sorry, that was 4 days ago. Don't expect me to remember things. Anyway, a good time was had by all, and the movie sucked. There it is. Next week, by God, Dorian will, in theory, be back. Dorian, you're like on a million podcasts. What do you have a job anymore? Do you work?
Yeah, I was actually when Sean was talking about Dances with Wolves. I was going to say I just didn't want to slow everything down. I was actually this last weekend in South Dakota, and I actually got to be on places.
My former home state. Nice.
So yeah, and they were like, is this one of your favorite movies? I'm like, oh God, no, it's boring as fuck, but I love being on film sets, places where shit was filmed,
Fantastic. So speaking of film sets, Dorian will be hanging out at a TV party, the odd one that I host these days that doesn't involve Jesse, and we will be talking The Offer from Paramount Plus, which was a story about the making of The Godfather. And then a week from tonight, 87 people will be on to do an on trial for Beetlejuice. Actually, those 87 people are as follows.
Jesus.
Sean Comer, Dorian Price, and Shay Tate, and whatever other people Dorian decides to bring on the podcast. So that'll be fun. Yes. All right.
Your Honor, I would like to bring my 15th witness.
As I slowly die on camera.
You might get a surprise visit from me then.
I feel like you also almost need to run that podcast guest list down like it's an early '90s rundown of Royal Rumble entries. The Earthquake, Macho King, Randy Savage, Haku.
There are going to be more people on that podcast than there are guys on the Wu-Tang Clan. So, and I'm going to be like, like the guy from Clark's during that and type of, I'm not even supposed to be here today.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk about this movie. Anywho.
Why is there a dead guy in my bathroom my girlfriend just fucked?
Well, what smells like shoe polish?
My girlfriend fucking a dead person is the phrase that pays here on the Radulich Broadcasting Network. So, Mick, why don't you do your plug? Where can they find you? What do you do? Your social media, any jujitsu you're rolling in, whatever it is that you want to talk about, now's the opportunity to tell yourself.
So I consider myself a creative. I have talents in both painting and also sewing and whatnot. But recently, I am one of the contestants for Face of Horror, a chance to go ghost hunting with Kane Hodder, sorry. And so voting starts September 3rd, and the link is faceofhorror.org/2024/Mick like it's spelled on the screen, and for listeners, it's MIK Wanamaker. So vote for me.
Yay!
Happily.
All right, Dorian seems to have fucked off. Sean, what video games are you playing for Twitch these days?
All right. Your best places to follow me these days are actually probably going to be on Instagram and Threads. If you want to hear me talk about, oh, Jesus, where do I even begin? I do stream on Twitch when I'm able to. Lately, I'm a little bit immersed in going back to school and trying to find a job here in Kansas City. But I do plan to get back to twitch.tv/Comer in the very near future, where I play a concerning amount of Overwatch 2. I should probably be a little bit worried about myself for how much ranked Overwatch 2 I play.
What is the intervention for his Overwatch addiction?
Not until after season 12 is over. My mains are meta right now. I need to enjoy this while it lasts. They tried to nerf them and they made them better.
I don't understand any of this.
But anyway.
It's okay, Grandpa.
Yeah. When I'm not playing Overwatch, I stream a variety of other games. Usually anything that is lengthy, story based, and especially something I've played before, where I can just kind of give a running review of everything I think about, how much I love it, what the game means to me, and how it kind of plays into how much I love gaming. So if that is your thing, please feel free, go over, give me a follow on all of the things. Don't be a stranger.
Dorian Price from Wonder Pictures. If it's good, it's a wonder. Tell us what your actual production company is.
Much to Mark's continuing chagrin, it is not Wonder Pictures. It is Frikey Pictures, or as Mr. Radulich himself loves to call it, Freaky Pictures. And he said that's how it is, and you have to suck it up.
Listen, at least you're not from the Screaming Boy podcast. Now shut the fuck up and sell your production company.
Frikey Pictures. While Sean dies in the corner. Frikey Pictures. If it needs to be photographed, if it needs to be filmed, if it needs to be created, give us a call. On Instagram, we're at Frikey Pictures. On Facebook, we're Dorian Price Videography and Photography. That's about to be changed very soon. I just got back doing a tour with Elton Dan and the Rocket Band in South Dakota. They got to play the Sturgis show, Cool Nights, that was just out there. It was fantastic. We had over 20,000 people there. It was one of the hardest jobs I've ever done in my life, but damn it, I'm still really good at acrobatics, so I was glad about that. 26, and I can still roll through people with a camera in my hand. But yes, if there's anything you guys out there who are watching need, again, film, we're about to add a new part of the business where we will do professional editing, either live editing or editing after the fact. We have the best prices. We have, as my grandpa Richard, who was also a photographer, used to say, the great Richard Price would say, you're going to get 4-star quality for 2-star prices. And by the way, Mark, you shouldn't be pissed out about the length of this whole podcast. We are still shorter than 90% of Stanley Kubrick's fucking movies.
We are almost the length of an actual Stanley Kubrick movie.
So, Mick, let me tell you, I don't want to tell the other guys. I'm just going to talk to you for a second.
Okay.
There was a guy I'm friends with. Name is Ronnie Adams. Good to his mother. And he had a podcast about 100 years ago called the Screaming Boy Podcast. He stopped doing it not too long into its run, but I have never stopped calling him Ronnie Adams from the Screaming Boy Podcast. And when people started to question me about it, I doubled down and started saying everyone was from the Screaming Boy Podcast. Welcome to the Radulich and Broadcasting Network of ongoing jokes and running gags.
We'll have to figure out who I am then.
Yeah, listen, come on, damn you, Hollywood. I'll marry you off to at least a half a dozen reviewers like I do everyone else.
Dreams do come true.
All right. Well, folks, I have to go to work tomorrow. So for Sean Comer, for Mick Wanamaker, and Dorian Price, I'm really sweaty. Be well, be safe, and be well, be safe, and behave.